A finger hovers above a switch. It shakes, just a little, then presses. Somewhere beyond the wall, a stranger cries out. A calm voice says, "Please continue." The finger does. Not because it's cruel, not because it wants to, but because something inside has gone quiet, while something outside has grown loud. That quiet is the glitch. Shock obedience is the small, terrifying compromise a person makes when their inner compass yields to a badge, a title, a uniform, or a script. It rarely arrives with a dramatic command. It arrives as a polite nudge. Just sign here. Just do this one more round. It will be fine. The room is tidy, the authority is steady, and you feel oddly responsible for being cooperative rather than responsible for the person who might be hurt. Picture a late night at a tidy office. A manager leans over and says, "We're close. Just tweak the report so it looks consistent with last quarter." It sounds harmless, almost helpful. You hesitate. Their tone adds weight. "We all do it," they add, like a blanket pulled over a conscience. You tweak a line. Next week, a bigger line. Soon, you are pressing a different kind of switch. Out loud, you might say, "I'm just following instructions." Inside, you know you've stepped further than you meant to. Here's the thing we rarely admit. Most people don't wake up wanting to harm anyone. They drift, inch by inch, in rooms where obedience is praised and questions are inconvenient. Authority doesn't have to shout. It only has to sound certain. The mind, hungry for order, loves certainty. The body, tired from the day, loves the relief of deferring. The result is that subtle pause where your judgment should rise and doesn't. There is a simple way to puncture the trance. Name what is happening. Say, "I'm feeling pressured to do something I think could hurt someone." Saying it plainly pulls your attention back to your own agency. Psychologically, naming the pattern creates a sense of safety and lowers defenses, which turns a locked-up moment into a small opening to choose differently. When you can breathe again, the spell of authority loosens. Try this small script the next time a calm voice asks you to press a switch you do not believe in. First, slow the scene. A slow scene is hard to hijack. Say, "I need a moment." Second, ask for clarity in concrete terms. What exactly are we doing? Who could be harmed? Who benefits? Third, shift responsibility back where it belongs. Please put this request in writing with your name attached. You are not being difficult. You are reintroducing accountability, and accountability is kryptonite to blind obedience. Consider a hospital hallway. A new nurse receives an order that feels off, an unusually high dose. There is pressure everywhere, from the clock, from the pager, from the expectation to be helpful. The nurse pauses, names their doubt, checks the chart, calls for a second set of eyes. No drama, no hero speech. Just a small refusal to let compliance outvote care. That tiny pivot is the difference between harm and help. It is not rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It is connection and responsibility chosen over routine compliance. Or, imagine a group of friends outside a bar telling one person, "You're fine to drive. It's only a few blocks." It sounds like kindness. It is actually handoff. One person can break the sequence by naming the harm. "We're about to risk lives to save 5 minutes. I'm calling a ride." The pressure dissolves, not because anyone lost, but because someone remembered what the real stakes were. Shock obedience lives in the space where we forget to look at the human in front of us and stare, instead, at the instruction. It wants us to move faster than our conscience, to nod before we think, to keep the scene moving. You don't need to be loud to stop it. You need to be specific, and you need to be brave in inches. Slow the moment, name the pattern, ask for accountability. Choose the person, not the protocol. The finger can hover and not press. The voice can say, "I do not consent to this." The room might go quiet for a breath. In that breath, the glitch clears and something better takes its place. a steady, ordinary courage that refuses to pass pain along just because someone asks nicely. That kind of courage is how terrible moments end and how better ones begin. The floor tilts a fraction to the left before you realize it's not the room. It's your brain missing a beat. Sleep slips away for a night, then another, and suddenly the world begins to stutter. Streetlights smear into comets. Your tongue feels too big for your mouth. You drop a spoon, and the clatter sounds like a warning from somewhere behind the wall. That is the first glitch. Reality keeps playing, but your mind buffers. It starts small. Words you use every day fall through the cracks. You reach for a name you have said 1,000 times and come up empty, like a hand closing on water. The sentence you are speaking becomes a hallway with vanishing doors. You pause, smile, pretend it is a joke. But inside, there is a blinking cursor where your thoughts should be. Your body follows, quietly disobeying. You stand to walk and your balance wobbles, not enough to fall, just enough to feel wrong. The coffee cup is warm, and then it is on the floor, and you do not remember dropping it. Somewhere between one blink and the next, your brain took a micro vacation and left the lights on. That is a micro sleep, a tiny blackout that can happen at a red light, on a ladder, in the middle of a conversation. You wake without knowing you were gone. As hours pile up, light gets sharper and shadows grow teeth. You catch movement in your periphery, but when you turn, there is only a coat on a chair. You hear your phone vibrate inside your pocket while it lies silent on the table. Your name whispers from the next room in a voice that sounds like yours. This is the second glitch. The mind hates silence and sends in extras to fill the stage. Hallucinations do not always announce themselves with drama. Often they are small and polite, nudging you to doubt your senses. Your emotions fray into threads. Laughter comes suddenly and feels empty. Irritation sticks to everything. The slightest complication tastes like betrayal. You check the door once, then again, and none of the checks count. Anxiety rises like steam you cannot see but cannot stop breathing. You look in the mirror and your face returns your stare a fraction too slow. You still recognize yourself, but the feeling carries a seam. Time slides. Minutes stretch into syrup, and hours snap by like rubber bands. You walk into a room and forget why you came, not because you are distracted, but because the bridge between intention and action crumbled. Your brain tries to compensate with shortcuts. It invents memories that feel true. You put the keys in a place you never would and swear you did not. Later, you blame someone else. This is the third glitch. A confident lie told by a tired narrator. Then comes the autopilot, a strange relief. You can do tasks without thinking, but the tasks do you instead. You arrive at a destination and cannot recount the turns. You wash the same dish twice. The world gets quieter, not calmer, as if the volume knob is broken and stuck between clicks. In that hush, your heart sounds loud, and your own blinking feels like footsteps in an empty house. If you push farther, dreams start leaking into daylight. You see colors behind your eyelids like stained glass. Random phrases surface with conviction. Cabbage window ocean, and somehow it makes sense for a second. When you try to read, letters slide off the page and collect in the corner. Closed eyes do not bring rest. Open eyes do not guarantee wakefulness. Your body pleads in a language of mistakes. You mistype every password. You drop the last piece of a puzzle and can't be bothered to pick it up. You forget to eat, then overeat, then feel sick. You shiver in a warm room. The thermostat says one thing, your skin says another. Even your muscles glitch, twitching in little Morse codes you never learned to translate. And yet, lying down feels dangerous because it means surrendering. You keep your phone close as if it can stand guard. You scroll and scroll, bargaining with yourself for one more minute. But the truth is simple and a little brutal. When you do not sleep, the mind begins to counterfeit you. It imitates your voice, borrows your habits, tries to keep the show running with duct tape and bravado. It is convincing until it isn't. There is nothing supernatural about this. It is human hardware operating without maintenance. And the most disturbing part is how ordinary it looks from the outside. You can pass for fine while your inner world unspools like a film that has slipped from its reel. Then, with the quiet mercy of a light switch, sleep returns. The floor levels. Language comes back. The coat is only a coat. But you will remember the glitches, not as dreams, but as a version of you that existed in the cold, flickering gap between exhaustion and oblivion. The first thing that moved wasn't me. My face hung in the glass, calm, unbothered, and then the corner of my mouth ticked upward before I felt the muscle in my cheek catch up. A fraction late. Like a laugh you pretend to join after the punchline has already landed. They'd called it a mirror room, but that felt too simple. Mirrors stacked into mirrors, an orchard of silver trees, every step scattering 100 copies of my body. Somewhere, a speaker hummed a tone that never quite settled on a note. I touched my throat and watched a dozen hands arrive on cue, and one in the far corner pause, like it had to think about it. A kid ran past me and vanished into a column of reflections. His sneakers squeaked. In the glass to my left, he flashed by. In the glass to my right, he didn't. My heart did an animal thing in my chest, the old instinct curling tight, ready to sprint. I looked for a seam, for bad carpentry, for a trick hinge. Breath fogged and cleared, and every version of me exhaled together. All of us synchronized again, as if that odd beat had never happened. I told myself it was an installation, a clever arrangement of angles. But even clever has limits. I smiled deliberately just to test the machine. The smiles returned, a ripple of white teeth. But in one narrow panel, a tired expression lingered, a version of me who hadn't gotten the memo that we'd decided to be fine. That one still wore the face I hadn't meant to show. Psychologically, that's where it gets under the skin. The brain is a prediction machine, and it hates being contradicted by its own senses. When reality slips half a second out of step with expectation, the mind doesn't shrug. It scrambles to stitch the world back together. And in that scramble, we feel the uncanny tug that makes the air colder, even if the thermostat hasn't moved. It reminded me of an orchestra that misses one beat, then pretends the new tempo was the plan all along. The song continues, the player's never acknowledging the hiccup, but your ear has already heard the tear. Metaphors help make sense of this kind of strangeness, because plain facts feel too blunt for a sensation that is more like a whisper under the floorboards than a shout in your face. A woman brushed past, muttering sorry, and her perfume trailed in a dozen directions. In the glass ahead, my reflection leaned closer than I did, as if it wanted a better look at me. I spoke aloud just to anchor myself. Hello? My voice felt small in the hall. The attendant at the entrance, a soft figure amid the facets, called back, "You okay?" I started to say yes, then glanced over and saw one of me still forming the word. Slow. Bad lip sync on a body that was mine. It is easy to call that fear. It would be neater to call it a trick. It's not just fear, it's the moment your certainty stumbles and you realize how much of your life runs on silent autopilot. Not everything is broken. Sometimes the wrongness is just a mirror showing you the gap between action and awareness. Here is the part I keep. I raised my hand one last time, pressed my palm to the glass, and felt cool surface meet warm skin. Every copy mirrored me perfectly, obedient, normal, except the tall pain by my shoulder, where my palm hovered an inch away on its side, like it had decided, just for today, to decline the handshake. A blink later, it sealed the deal and matched me, as if embarrassed to have been caught. That's the disturbance. Not a monster in the mirror, but the realization that you are a creature of timing, stitching, guesswork, and sometimes the stitching snags. The most unsettling glitches are not loud. They are small delays, swapped expressions, a step that lands a hair off the beat. Tell yourself it's an art piece. Smile, so all the copies will smile back. Then listen to the faint click of your mind catching up to itself, the way a lock does when the key finally turns. Balance the story you tell about what just happened with the story your body tells about how it felt, because the truth lives in the overlap. You walk out into ordinary light and everything is fine again. Shoes on tile, doors that are only doors, faces that belong to the bodies they were issued with. Still, a part of you looks at every surface just a little longer, just in case. The world didn't break. It showed you the hinge. And once you've seen the hinge, you never quite forget the room that taught you to look. Mirror room. Midnight stuttered once in the county transport lot. A clock on the cinderblock wall clicked from 12:04 back to 12:03, and in that hiccup of time, a chain-link gate squealed open for a bus that was both early and late. The driver killed the engine, steam ghosting up from the hood, and two men in orange stood to be counted like they had been counted 100 times before. There's a word that guards use when they tell the story after: prison swap. Not a trade, not a deal, just a misfile in reality that nobody can fix with a clipboard. Officer Lane slid the door and called the first name. The man looked up. Same face as the photo, same scar on the right eyebrow. Lane hesitated. In the picture, the scar leaned left. He shook it off and asked again. Name? The man answered steady. Darren Cole. Lane checked the sleeve tag. It said a different name, worn pale by laundry and years. The fingerprint scanner chirped green, so the gate man waved them through. Paper said Darren was headed north. The bus said he was here. The scanner said, good enough. Inside Gray Ridge, a second officer waited with a matching file for a different man. The picture, the signature, even the messy loop in the letter R lined up. But the eyes were wrong in the way you notice when you meet a cousin you have only seen in old photographs. It was him, except it wasn't. He signed anyway. They always sign when the line is placed in front of them, and the room is too bright and the rules are louder than the doubts. Hours later, a woman sat at her kitchen table with a bitter coffee and a phone that finally rang. It's me, the voice said. She froze. Same words, wrong weight. Her husband always laughed before hello. A soft puff like he could not believe calls still reached him through concrete and distance. This voice had no laugh. It knew her childhood dog's name, the street they had kissed on, the middle name he teased her about. Yet she pulled the phone away and stared at it like the screen itself had changed colors. You don't sound right, she whispered. The voice paused, a silence so long she could hear the refrigerator click on. It's me, it said again, as if repeating something makes it true. Here is the unsettling part. Systems exist to lock down identity, names, numbers, prints, codes. We rely on the stack of details to keep the world in place. Psychologically, that stack is comfort. It anchors you when everything else feels like fog. When one detail slides, just one, the mind starts searching for solid ground. When several slide at once, even if only by a fraction, the floor tilts. You feel it before you can explain it. A name that matches a face but not a voice. A scar that leans left in a picture and right in the fluorescent light. A signature that curls the same way but lands a millimeter off. None of it wrong enough to stop the machine. All of it wrong enough to make your skin know. By morning, the paperwork was complete. Darren Cole existed in 2 ledgers. 2 lockers held the same list of property. A wallet he did not have. A key he could not name. 2 guards swore they had counted him. Somewhere, a cellmate sat up and said, "You look different, man," and let it go because days inside are shaped by routine, not certainty. The bus pulled out, on time and not. Its route repeating like a loop that thinks it is a line. You do not need to believe in portals to feel how thin the world can be. Sometimes the swap is not 2 people changing places. Sometimes the swap is a file sliding over a life while the person stands right there, breathing. Sometimes the bars are paperwork. Sometimes the lock turns because a scanner chirped and a clock twitched, and nobody could afford to ask the wrong question in the wrong room. If you ever find yourself holding a name that suddenly feels heavy, listening to a voice that knows everything except how to sound like itself, remember this: the mind wants clean lines, but the edges of reality are stitched by human hands, and stitches can slip. On those nights, check the scar, listen for the laugh, and don't be surprised when the world says the record is correct. Disturbance doesn't always announce itself with a bang. Sometimes it signs neatly on the line and walks straight through the gate. The name lived on the tip of your tongue a breath ago, and now it's gone, erased like chalk in rain. A door clicks behind you, and you stand in the room you chose and cannot remember why you crossed the threshold. Somewhere between one step and the next, something reaches into your mind and pulls the thread. That's the memory eraser, not a gadget, a moment. The briefest static in the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. Here's the unsettling part. It rarely feels like a glitch while it happens. It feels smooth, ordinary. You arrive at your driveway with no memory of the turns you took. Your body parked the car while your attention slipped out the window and stared at nothing. You look at an old family photo and see yourself in a red coat you swear you never owned. A friend laughs at a joke you apparently made last week, the very one you're hearing for the first time. A set of keys sleeps in the freezer, silver shapes under frost. And you swear you never put them there. The world doesn't wobble. It continues as if this edit was always in the script. There's a trick our mind loves to play, and it's so convincing. Memory feels like pressing play on a recording, but it's closer to a reenactment. Each time we remember, we rebuild the scene from scraps. A smell, a word, the outline of a face. Sometimes the stagehands are tired, sometimes the props are missing, and sometimes new lines slip into the script because the story needs to make sense. Psychologically, this is the mind striving for coherence. It prefers a complete picture, even if it has to paint a corner that never existed. Picture a late night. You're composing a message that matters, and the cursor blinks like a metronome for your heart. You type the middle, then the end, and your phone buzzes with a notification. By the time you switch back, the opening you thought you wrote never actually left your head. You search the text for a paragraph that only existed in intention. The memory eraser doesn't delete, it prevents the save. Our attention and memory share a thin wall. When something distracts us at the moment of encoding, the memory never quite prints. This is why we forget what we walked into the room for. The doorway is a scene change, and our brain resets the set. Psychologically, the context changed, and the cue we needed stayed on the other side of the door. Then there are the shared misremembrances, the lines an entire audience swears were in the film, even though the footage proves otherwise. It's chilling because it exposes a deeper truth. Stories spread, and the more we repeat them, the more the repeated version becomes the real version. Our minds are social. We borrow beats from each other. We absorb confident retellings, and the rehearsal of the wrong line makes it easier to perform than the right one. Psychologically, repetition builds fluency. What flows easily is mistaken for what's true. That smooth feeling can be a trap. You might feel a shiver of self-doubt in all of this, and that's honest. But there's a gentler way to see it. The memory eraser is proof that your mind is alive, not mechanical. It edits for survival. It prioritizes the now. When danger spikes or emotion surges, details blur so you can move. When life is routine, attention drifts to protect energy, and autopilot carries you home. Psychologically, this trade-off is efficient. Your brain favors patterns because patterns save time. The cost is occasional ghosts in the system. So, what can you do when the static hits? Slow down the cut. Leave breadcrumbs for your future self. Say the purpose out loud before you cross the doorway. Put the object where it lives the second it's in your hand. Write the first sentence before you look away. These tiny anchors make the mind's reenactment easier to stage. And when a memory clashes with the evidence, treat certainty as a polite suggestion, not a verdict. The scariest mistakes are the confident ones. If the memory eraser feels disturbing, it's because it touches identity. If memory is an edit, what is the director's cut of you? Maybe it's this. You're not the sum of perfect files. You're the storyteller who keeps choosing meaning. And on the nights when a name dissolves, when the room forgets why it wanted you, when the photo looks back with a detail you can't place, breathe. Recognize the hush in the booth. Then speak the line you do know. Return to the scene you're in. Let the next true moment record itself, because the memory eraser is real. But so is the hand that writes again. A borrowed voice can move, a crowd like wind moves wheat. No face, no handshake, just a tone with confidence and a rhythm that says, this is how things are. We stop, we shuffle, we comply. That is invisible authority. It slips in through speakers on ceilings, through polite notices taped to doors, through glowing screens that promise they know the way better than you do. You have felt it. The intercom crackles and tells the building to wait for further instructions. Smoke whispers at the edges of the carpet, and yet 100 feet do not run, because the voice said, wait. In a parking garage, a red plastic arm drops across the exit, and there is no guard in sight. No law behind it, just a rectangle of painted metal and a little beep. Everyone halts, everyone pays, everyone passes one by one, as if the arm could arrest a car. A phone rings at a store, and the caller says they are the manager's boss. The voice is calm, authoritative, a little bored with having to explain. They give small tasks, tiny rules, nothing wild at first, just procedural, just policy. Step by step, a sensible person has walked past their own boundaries, not because they wanted to, but because the calls kept coming, and the voice sounded like it carried consequences. The face was not there, but the fear was. On the sidewalk, a green figure lights up above the crosswalk. Even when the bulb sticks and stays on, the crowd moves like a river all at once. The signal is wrong, but the signal is loud. A navigation app says, turn left down a road that does not exist. And tires cut toward gravel anyway, because the arrow on the glass has become more real than the world outside the windshield. A blue checkmark appears next to a stranger's name, and their words travel faster than your doubt can run. This is not a story about stupidity. It is a story about survival. Long before badges and logins and laminated signs, we learned that listening to the person who sounded like they knew was safer than guessing alone. That shortcut is powerful. It keeps traffic from collapsing into chaos. It helps children cross streets behind a raised hand. It turns a scattered room into a team. But every shortcut can be hijacked. That is when the glitch shows up. The glitch is a pause where your mind should be sprinting. It is the moment when the tone of a command overrides what your eyes can see and what your gut can sense. A uniform without accountability. A rule without a reason. A beep that you obey out of habit more than thought. It feels professional. It feels official. And it often comes wrapped in a gentle request, the kind that lets you soothe yourself by saying you are only following directions. You can feel the edges of it by paying attention to the choreography. Invisible authority tends to ask for compliance in stages. It starts simple, it repeats itself. It uses words like policy and procedure and for your safety. It presents urgency but not presence. No one stands with you. No one owns the instruction in the room. The voice hovers above your head or glows from your pocket and expects you to nod. There are ways to melt it. Trade speed for clarity. If the command says wait, set a tiny clock in your head and reassess in a slow breath. If a voice claims a title, Ask for a full name, a return number, something that a real person can afford to give and a fake one will hesitate to share. If the order wants you to cross a line you would never cross on a calm day, call someone you trust and speak the sentence out loud. Hearing it in your own voice breaks the spell. Look for reversibility. If a mistake cannot be undone, it deserves company in the decision. Real authority does not fear witnesses. Most of all, notice when silence has been replaced by signals. When the recording tells you everything is fine while your senses disagree, favor your senses. When an empty hallway tells you to stand behind a rope, find the human who tied it. When your phone insists on a turn that your eyes cannot verify, let your eyes win. Authority that is legitimate has fingerprints. It leaves names on forms, faces in rooms, responsibility on the table. We are wired to follow. We can also be wired to verify. The trick is not to become a contrarian who refuses every instruction. The trick is to slow the loop so the shortcut does not run you. When the next anonymous voice arrives with a calm tone and a tidy script, ask it to step into the light. If it cannot, let its orders fall away like dust and walk by your own sight. A man ties his shoelace with one hand while the other hand quietly unravels it. He frowns, reties it, and again the rogue hand sneaks in, tugging, undoing, acting like it belongs to someone else. He is not performing a trick. This is what it looks like when a brain is split. To stop storms of seizures from ripping through a life, surgeons sometimes cut the thick bridge that runs between the left and right halves of the brain. That bridge has a name as soft as it is vital, the corpus callosum. When it is severed, the lightning of epilepsy often calms. But the weather inside can change in other ways, stranger ways, as if the mind now speaks two dialects that cannot hear each other. The left side of the brain is usually the chatterbox. It loves to label, to narrate, to make sense. The right side is the quiet watcher. It sees shapes, faces, spaces, and feelings, and it often does not speak in words. In a split brain, these two neighbors still live under one skull, but the hallway between them has been bricked up. They must reach for the world on their own. Scientists learn this by whispering to each side separately. They flashed a word to the right eye, and the left brain read it out loud. They flashed a word to the left eye, and the right brain saw it, but stayed silent. The mouth said nothing, but the left hand, guided by the right brain, reached for the thing it could not name. Show the right brain a snow shovel. Show the left brain a chicken claw. Ask what the person sees. The mouth says, chicken. The left hand points to the shovel. Why the shovel? They ask. The mouth, loyal to its story, smiles and explains that it is for cleaning the chicken coop. The mind makes the world neat even when the truth is tangled. Everyday life becomes a tug of war. A woman reaches for a cigarette and her free hand slaps it away. She buttons a shirt while the other hand unbuttons it. She reaches into a closet and two halves of her argue over a dress. It feels funny until it feels frightening, because the battlefield is a body and the soldiers are parts of the same self. Vision tells the tale more quietly. The world hits your eyes in two halves. The left half of your view feeds the right brain. The right half of your view feeds the left. In a split brain, a picture flashed to the left field is seen by the right brain alone. Ask aloud what appeared, and the voice says nothing is there. But slide a hand into a box of objects, and the fingers find the picture it cannot say. The truth is present, but it has no path to speech. Sometimes the right brain hears a command. The word stop appears to the left field of view. The person freezes, stands still. Why did you stop? They ask. The mouth shrugs and says it felt like the right thing. The watcher obeyed. The narrator made a reason. Two halves, each doing what they do best, both convinced they are steering. What does that make of us? Are we one thing pretending to be two, or two things pretending to be one? The disturbing part is not the tricks on lab screens. It is the gentle realization that a single sense of self is more of a treaty than a truth. Most of the time, our bridge holds. Neurons hum, signals cross, and we feel whole. But take away the crossing, and the center keeps going, building stories to connect islands that can no longer speak. Yet there is a kind of grace in it too. The person still laughs, still loves, still learns. The left hand can draw what the right brain sees. The voice can explain what the left brain believes. Life adapts. The two sides develop a rhythm, a fragile peace. And sometimes they still argue over a shoelace. If you ever felt a sudden urge you could not name, a flash of knowing you could not put into words, you have brushed the edges of this divide. Inside every head is a chorus that sounds like a solo, only because the harmony is so tight. Split that harmony, and you hear the parts, raw and exposed, each ready to take the lead. A man ties his shoelace again. One hand moves with calm purpose. The other hovers, then settles. For a moment, the pact holds, the knot stays. And in that small, ordinary victory, you can sense how much of everyday life depends on a bridge you never see, a bridge that keeps your many selves speaking as one. The clock is a confident liar. It ticks in steady steps while your mind splices, stretches, and deletes, making the day feel like elastic pulled past its limit and quietly let go. One moment is syrup, the next is smoke. You know this feeling. Time does not move the way we think it should. Here is the unsettling truth. Your sense of time is not kept in gears or digits. It is stitched together by a brain that edits on the fly. It fills gaps, compresses routine, and slows the film when it thinks you might be in danger. Psychologically, your sense of time is the overlap of prediction and memory, the mind's best guess, smoothed into a story you can stand to live inside. Picture the drive you have done 100 times. Streetlights, the same turn, the same faded billboard. You blink and somehow your exit is behind you, like you were dragged across a blank space. Highway hypnosis is not sleep. It is the brain saying, "We have seen this. We can compress it." The tape skips forward. Meanwhile, novelty does the opposite. On a first day in a strange place, minutes swell and wobble. Your attention records more frames, and the hour feels thick and long, like it is being printed in real time. Fear bends it further. When the shout comes from the next room, when the glass breaks, when the car swerves, the world can slow into brutal clarity. That is not time changing outside you. That is the body dropping you into a narrow beam of focus, counting the details that might keep you alive. Later, the memory plays back in slow motion because the mind archived each beat like a page in a flip book. But in boredom, each second is pronounced and heavy, yet later it leaves almost no trace, an empty archive labeled with a long sigh. Then there are the small glitches that feel like a dare. You glance at the clock, the second hand seems frozen, and you wonder if you caught it off guard. You read a message for a single second, and the phone returns your gaze 40 minutes older. You step into an elevator, and the doors open immediately on a floor you do not remember passing. These are the seams. Your attention jumped, the brain filled the gap, and the edit only became visible because the light hit it just right. It can be tender too. In grief, time becomes liquid. Days stretch and collapse around a silly photo or a voicemail you are not ready to delete. The future shortens to a sentence at a time. In a hospital corridor, an hour grows teeth. In laughter, a dinner slips by without anyone noticing the plates are empty. Flow happens, and time is a rumor. The mind keeps stitching. The story keeps moving. What makes this feel disturbing is not the distortion itself. It is the realization that your inner clock is not a clock at all. It is a storyteller that cares less about absolute seconds than about meaning. It saves your focus for the strange, the risky, the loved. It runs routine on fast forward. It slows down the almost accident, the first kiss, the last goodbye. And afterward, it arranges the footage so your life makes some kind of sense. Psychologically, that little nod to science is not trivia. It gives your experience weight. a why behind the weirdness. So, when time breaks around you, when a minute becomes a corridor with too many doors, notice it. Say, this is the mind editing. In doing that, you step from inside the cut to the editing bay. You become the viewer who sees the trick and still loves the film. Name the glitch, and the closing line of the moment will stick. We remember what circles back. The clock will keep lying. Let it. The measure that matters is the one you are making as you go. Sometimes the most human thing is the warp itself, the way attention, fear, boredom, and wonder bend the tape and leave fingerprints. Time distortion is not a bug in you. It is you revealed. They rolled her past the swinging doors, and suddenly the air changed, bright and cold, as if the walls themselves were breathing. Overhead, the lights hung like moons. I kept telling myself this was routine. She kept a brave smile until the mask touched her face and her eyes slid away like a curtain closing. In the waiting room, hours stretch in a peculiar way. You listen to the vending machine hum as if it were a small animal. You measure time by footsteps, by the soft hiss of automatic doors, by the coffee cooling in your hands. I watched the clock, then stopped because the second hand seemed to stutter, leap, then lose its place. When the surgeon finally walked in, his scrubs were spotless. He spoke with the careful tone you use to place a glass on a table without noise. Everything went fine, he said. Textbook. Minimal bleeding, smooth appendix, quick removal. He nodded while my mind scrambled to catch up, and the words quick and fine eased their way into me like warm water. When I saw her, she was pale but calm, the anesthetic still holding her under a slow, heavy tide. A nurse lifted the sheet. The bandage was small and neat, a slim white square. No drainage bulb, no lines of black thread, no angry redness. Minimal incision, the nurse said, tapping the bandage with a quick, bright fingernail. I wanted to ask how they had removed an organ through something the size of a postage stamp, but I nodded, because nodding is what you do when everyone else is nodding. The pain was gone. That was the miracle and the anchor. She woke with a dry mouth and a quiet face, and said it felt like someone had switched off a light. The monitors blinked their steady little prayers. The night nurse hummed a tune that I could never quite catch, as if she were skipping over every other note. We slept. Morning came like an apology. Discharge papers listed everything with tidy precision. Procedure codes, times, vitals, the name of a surgeon whose signature looped and collapsed like a knot. There was a line for the specimen sent to pathology. Collected and delivered. Everyone moved with the confident rhythm of done and dusted. At home, she shuffled from sofa to bed to shower, held her side when she laughed, and sipped broth that steamed and fogged her glasses. We threw away the last of the painkillers after a week because she never needed them. It was the bill that first bent the picture. There were charges for 3 trocars, for laparoscopic equipment, for an instrument I had to look up because it sounded like a poem. 3 entry points, the guide said, 3 tiny scars. I looked again at her skin. 1 neat line where the bandage had been. Nothing else. No faint dots, no bruising halos, no ghostly punctures. Just 1 slim closed mouth where an entire organ supposedly vanished. I called. They said minimal invasiveness can look like magic. I asked for the operative report. The PDF arrived with a template's tidiness, filled by someone who knew the steps by heart. Incision at the umbilicus. Ports placed at standard locations. Appendix identified and isolated. Clips applied. Specimen retrieved in a bag. Closure in the usual fashion. It read like a recipe. At the bottom, the timestamps glanced at each other sideways. The start time was after the first documented incision. The end time drifted forward, then back, then settled like a bird that didn't quite trust the branch. The pathology call came a week later, quick as a match. They did not receive the specimen. Must have been a logging issue. It happens, the voice said. and my stomach did a small, private twist. An image later, ordered by a cautious new doctor, showed something that should not have existed. The faint, grainy outline of an appendix exactly where an appendix belongs. The radiologist used gentle language, appears consistent with, suggests persistence. The surgeon's office suggested the image was a remnant, an artifact, a trick of the scanner. We went back to the hospital. The OR schedule from that night was printed in a pale ink that had bled into the paper fibers. Her name was there, yes, with a room number that the receptionist said had been closed for renovation that week. The surgeon we had met was out of town. The nurse from the night shift smiled with practiced kindness and said, "Sometimes you do not get the same faces twice." Months later, when the pain returned like a song you thought you had forgotten, the new team decided on another look. The camera found what the report had promised before, but never proved. The appendix nestled, quiet and unapologetic, as if it had never had a reason to leave. There were no clips, no scar tissue inside, no evidence of a journey. They removed it then truly, and the relief afterward was a clean, hard rain. I still think about that first night, the smell of something antiseptic and lemony in the hall, the precise movements, the spotless scrubs, the way everyone had a line to deliver and said it with certainty. I think about a surgery that felt like a play mounted by a cast that knew every cue. The body believes what it is told to believe. Maybe that is the most unsettling part, not the missing clips or the wrong room number or the vanishing specimen, but the fact that, for a while, her pain obeyed a story. The first time I saw the obedience drill, the room smelled like lemon cleaner and fear. Chairs were lined in a perfect grid, a tape square under each leg, as if even the furniture needed to remember its place. A woman with a clipboard stood at the front, mouth tight, eyes soft, tone like a lullaby spoken through a locked door. We were told it was a simple exercise in coordination. Breathe in, breathe out. Mirror the cues. Learn to respond without thinking. The word drilled into us was safety, but it felt like something heavier, like a blanket you cannot push off. A tone chimed, one clear note. The first command was a line. Body slid a fraction to the left. Another tone, comply. Hands folded into identical nests. Approve? Smiles bloomed all at once like a field of fake flowers opening on a timer. It was eerie and perfect and too smooth to be human. Then the first glitch happened. The instructor said, "Relax," and the smiles faded across the room like a wave receding, except for the man in the second row. His grin held, stretched a little wider, then wider still, like a mask being tightened from behind. The instructor touched his shoulder. "Reset," she said quietly. His mouth snapped to neutral, eyes blinking too fast, as if someone had pressed a hidden key. We practiced again. The chorus of breath, the synchronized nodding. Approve, align, comply. Every time we returned to neutral, a woman near the back whispered the same sentence under her breath. "I am fine to be here." The fifth time, she missed a beat. The whisper fell late, like a dropped drumstick. Her head tilted, listening for a cue that had not yet come. The instructor's eyes flicked to her, then past her, as if the best fix was to pretend it wasn't happening. We were told to stand. A unified rustle. We were told to sit. The room moved like a single animal. Then the instructor added a new word, prompt. We were to repeat the phrase that followed. "Prompt," she said. "I consent to guidance." The reply rolled around us like wind in tall grass. One man spoke a fraction of a second too soon, a rushed echo. His mouth kept moving when the rest of us had fallen quiet. "Prompt," he said again, but nothing followed it. The single word hung there, empty, reaching for a phrase he no longer owned. They brought out a metronome. Tick, tock, tick, tock, align, comply, approve. The cadence hardened into something more than timing. It burrowed. You could feel the room catch the rhythm like a fever. Someone started laughing softly, a helpless little sound, and could not stop. Between commands, the laugh kept tripping like a toy with a dying battery. "Reset," the instructor said. The laugh paused, then resumed. The same small laugh, the same pitch, as if the pause had been spliced in. When she tried the word pause, the entire room froze. It felt like a hand had pressed down over the air, flattening it. My fingertips tingled. A tear on the cheek of the woman beside me did not stop. It traveled and traveled, a tiny silver trail across still skin, like proof that time was still moving somewhere. "Release," the instructor said, and the breath that came back was ragged, as if we had all been underwater together. I told myself it was fatigue, suggestibility, some blend of nerves and polite performance. But the drill crept with me into places it did not belong. At the vending machine later, the hum of the compressor clicked on, and something in my spine straightened. A bus brake sighed and my shoulders softened. I watched a stranger on the sidewalk stop mid-step, eyes unfocused for half a second, then keep walking like nothing had happened. The next day we ran it with music. The instructor threaded a quiet piano beneath the room, notes like rain. Prompt: I consent to guidance. Align, comply, approve. The lights buzzed overhead. When one flickered, we all blinked together. I swear we did. The instructor watched us blink, and a small smile passed across her face, the kind that looks like pride from far away and like relief up close. A man finally resisted. He shook his head at a line, and his chair scraped outside the tape square. The sound was wild and alive. He stood. "No," he said, and his voice cracked in a human way that comforted me more than anything that day. The instructor lifted her hand, palm up, like offering him a bird. "Release," she said, but not to him, to the room. Every other body softened. The man did not. He tried to name himself. "My name is," he stuttered. My name is. The third time, he said the instructor's name instead of his own. He flinched like he felt it happen. We ended supposedly on a deep breath, hands at our sides, heads neutral, the metronome silent. She smiled in the doorway as we filed out and told us to have a good rest of our day. Outside, the air was cool and bigger than that room. A delivery truck hissed a long, even hush, and half the sidewalk turned their heads in perfect unison. That night, the kettle whistled, 3 short bursts. Without thinking, I stood. My mouth began to shape the words "I consent to guidance," and I heard, very softly from somewhere inside the house that was me, a calm voice say, "Reset." The thermostat lied before anyone did. It glowed a calm 68 while the vents hummed with a midsummer breath, and that is how the house began to argue with us. Not with slamming doors or howling pipes, with small contradictions, with the kind of misalignments that make your brain blink and reload. Everyone in the neighborhood called it Gaslight House, but they said it like a joke, a wink. We moved in anyway. Old bones, new paint, a sweet fig tree pressing its leaves against the kitchen window. The first week, the kitchen clock lost time, not by an hour, by slivers. You would look up and discover dinner had become midnight by a handful of stolen minutes. Then the milk shifted shelves overnight. Then my keys, always on the hook, appeared inside the freezer, wrapped in a hand towel like a small, cold animal. It is easy to blame yourself first. You shrug. You were tired. You were rushing. You were thinking about something else. Your brain patches the gap and calls it memory. But the house was patient, and it kept adding weight. Warm water came out of the cold tap only when my partner touched it. The porch light turned off when I stepped outside and back on when I reached for the switch. Music bled from the vent for a heartbeat, a song I knew from childhood, then silence so thick it made the hair on my arms rise. We started to argue in whispers at first. Did you move my journal? Did you leave the back door open? You promised to call the plumber. No, you promised. The house listened. I could feel it. The way a theater listens before the cue. The carpet had a subtle ridge you only felt in the dark. The hallway mirror leaned a fraction of an inch more each morning until I set it flush and nailed it down. 2 days later, it angled itself again. Not enough to prove, enough to suggest. Sleep in that place didn't behave like sleep. I would close my eyes and dream small, vivid things, like white chalk under my tongue, like the sound of water boiling when there was no kettle. I woke up swearing I had heard footsteps above us, counting to 13 and then starting over. My partner laughed, then stopped laughing, then asked why I was telling the same story twice at breakfast. I wasn't. I knew I wasn't. Still, the words coming out of my mouth felt like rehearsed lines delivered by someone standing behind me. Around the 3rd week, a neighbor knocked. She put a jar of plum jam in my hands and said, carefully, that the house had a personality. Not bad, just slippery. The last family left quickly. Not from ghosts, from doubt. Doubt had soaked into the drywall. It would get on your fingers if you brushed a certain corner of the hallway. She looked past me into the living room and asked if we had checked the carbon monoxide detector. We had. We thought we had. The light showed green. The house hummed, pleased. The little things kept stacking. A photograph on the mantel closed its eyes between glances. The dog refused to cross the threshold into the office after sunset. I heard my name from the basement, in my own voice. If you have never heard yourself call yourself, it sounds like a grainy recording of your future. That was the night I turned on every light in the place, even the bulb in the attic, even the strip under the cabinet that had never worked before, which suddenly worked as if it had been waiting for its moment. I decided we needed proof. We started leaving tiny traps for our own minds. We drew a chalk mark at the angle of the hallway mirror, a hair on the door jamb, a coin balanced on the kitchen switch. We both set alarms, then swapped phones. We would walk the perimeter together each evening, naming each window, each latch. We said the names out loud, which made it real, and still the coin fell, the chalk smudged, the hair drifted to the floor and lay across the threshold like a reminder we had not asked for. One late night, I followed the sound of breathing into the basement and found the furnace panel half open, wires bundled like veins. There were old-timers in there, obsolete little dials set to no schedule that made sense, clicking to themselves. A handyman later told us someone had once rigged the place for cleverness. Lights on at odd times, vents whispering when no one asked, a doorbell wired to ring once without being pressed. He laughed. I did not. A puzzle is fun until you live inside it. We replaced what we could. We sealed, tested, leveled. The house softened, but doubt does not leave a body clean. It stains. Months later, I still hide my keys in the freezer on purpose just to feel the shock of finding them again. My partner still confirms the porch light twice and then once more from the window. We still say the window names some nights, like a litany, like a spell. Gaslight House taught us that the smallest misfire in perception can undo a person more thoroughly than fear. You do not need a shadow in the doorway to lose yourself. You only need a thermostat that insists on being right when you know it is wrong, a mirror that leans by a whisper, a voice that sounds exactly like yours, calling your name from a room you swear you just left. The smile landed first, bright and wrong. The room was a funeral, the air thick with lilies and whispered grief, and yet his mouth moved as if a joke had been told. He covered it with a cough, with the back of his hand, with shame. But the switch had already been thrown. They call it an emotion switch when they do not have kinder words. 1 second you are faithful to what the moment demands, and the next, your feelings run down a hallway you did not choose. Laughter arrives in the middle of a sob. Tears fall at a birthday party while balloons bob with innocent joy. The body betrays the room, and the room stares back like you just confessed a secret you did not know you were keeping. There was a nurse who told me she started giggling whenever a patient cried. She would bite the inside of her cheek until it bled because she loved her patients, and she hated the way her laugh sounded in the hush of their fear. Another person said it came like a drop, a physical click beneath the sternum, then a rush, then a swing, like a pendulum with its own agenda. He said he could feel anger turn to tenderness in the span of a breath, and then snap back to anger before the next. He missed himself in those moments, like someone else had taken the wheel. You think you are steady until the day your face betrays you. The boss announces layoffs and your eyes burn, but not with empathy. They burn with the heat of a grin that does not belong here. A child trips and the room gasps, but you go soft with relief, and then odd joy, and then horror at your own odd joy. You are not evil, you tell yourself, not broken, not cruel. Yet there you are, holding emotions that feel like stolen property. It is disturbing because we take for granted that our insides line up with the world. We learn the rules of which feeling fits which scene. We are proud of our timing, our sympathy, the way we can hold it together in the storm. But a switch is not a dial. It does not care about context or costume, about the script we practiced. It flips, and in that flip, you see how fragile control can be. I remember a woman on a train sitting across from me, her hands clasped so tight the knuckles whitened. A man nearby was yelling into his phone, ugly and escalating. I felt fear rise for her, for all of us. Then, without warning, I felt this warm tide of calm slide in, like someone had wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. My heart slowed, my mouth almost smiled. Calm at the wrong time does not look noble. It looks like apathy. It looks like you do not care if the world cracks. I cared. My body lied. Some people learn tricks. Bite your tongue, count the veins in your wrist, anchor your eyes to a distant corner, and breathe quietly until the tide recedes. Others walk away before it happens. They become ghosts at weddings and strangers at hospital bedside vigils. It is the cost of keeping the room safe from the wrong face. What makes it so unsettling is how it exposes the gap between feeling and meaning. A laugh does not always mean a joke. Tears do not always mean sadness. Relief can arrive in danger. Terror can arrive in peace. The switch shows you that emotions are weather, and sometimes the forecast is a rumor with bad intentions. There is a story I cannot stop telling. A father hears glass shatter in the next room and runs, expecting blood, panic, loss. He finds his child standing amid the glittering shards, wide-eyed, unharmed. He feels joy first, huge and pure, and then rage so violent he has to leave the house. He calls it a glitch. He calls it a failure. But what if it is simply the body trying to hold the whole truth at once? The relief that the child is safe, the fury at how close danger came, the helplessness of being one breath away from a different life, all of those currents fighting through a single switch, sparking against each other. If you have felt it, you know the silence that follows. You replay your face, your tone, your reaction. You draft better versions of yourself in your mind. You promise to be good next time, and maybe you will. Or maybe the switch will flip again, a reminder that the human machine is not a straight line, but a box of tangled wires that still somehow lights the room. When the switch flips, give yourself one heartbeat of grace. Name it if you can. I am angry. I am relieved. I am laughing, and I do not know why. Let the room be what it is, and let yourself be what you are for a moment. Then steer back, gently, like guiding a skittish horse, toward the emotion that fits. Sometimes you will make it in time. Sometimes you will arrive late, with an apology in your throat and the right feeling finally waiting for you. A man stalls at a green light, hands fused to the steering wheel, like the plastic is the only thing keeping him from sinking. The horn behind him barks. The world moves. He does not. There is no dramatic reason, no flat tire, no seizure, just a quiet crash in the operating system. Breath turns to gravel. Thought turns to fog, and then the ground opens beneath his shoes. Welcome to the helplessness pit. It does not look like a hole. It looks like a hallway you have walked 1,000 times. Only tonight the door will not push, the badge will not scan. The memory of how to do simple things has slipped from your fingers like a slick coin. It sounds like fluorescent hum and far-off voices and the dampened thud of your own heartbeat. Because you are inside your skull and the volume knob is stuck, you become a still life of the person who was here a minute ago, the mouth that used to answer, the hands that used to reach. People call it freezing, melting down, shutting off. But the pit has its own climate. It is the moment the mind decides that action cannot lead to safety, and the body obeys. A paramedic who dives into wrecks for a living finds herself staring at a simple knot, unable to tie it. A teacher who manages chaos without flinching cannot lift a pen when it is time to sign her own name. You try to move, and the command gets lost in transit, like a letter with no address. Sometimes it begins with a voice. You know the one. Sit down. Stay quiet. Don't make a mess of this. Sometimes it begins with an audience, real or imagined. Eyes you cannot see but can definitely feel. The pit loves eyes. It loves rooms where there is one correct way to do a thing and 1,000 ways to fail publicly. It loves deadlines and passwords and doors that beep when you try the handle wrong. It loves the elevator that boards, waits, and does not move because you forgot to press the button. Everyone looks. The walls lean in. Down you go. There is no dignified way to fall. You do not flail. You evaporate. Your posture shrinks by inches that no one can measure, but everyone senses. Your voice gets thin and reedy, as if you were speaking through a straw. The tongue turns to a foreign object. Questions become threats. Choices become traps. Time becomes syrup. Your own name, repeated, becomes an accusation. Even kindness can bounce off, because the pit teaches you that being seen while immobile is more dangerous than disappearing. From the outside, it is confounding. Why didn't she scream? Why didn't he run? Why didn't someone do something? Because inside the pit, the brain is playing an old tape. When nothing you did mattered, the mind learned the safest move was stillness. When the future felt like a locked room, the mind learned to sit with the door. And then, years later, in a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, a green light flips to a summons and the old tape clicks on. If you have never been there, do not boast. The pit is patient. It waits in hospitals and stairwells and grocery aisles where 100 cereal boxes shout at you to decide. It hides in hospital clipboards, in first days on new floors, in phone calls from unknown numbers, in the polite pause before a presentation, where your name is said and your legs forget how to calibrate. It hides in good homes. It hides behind perfect hair and a practiced smile. If you have been there, you know the trick, the way time returns in tiny pieces, the way a single sensation can lift a corner of the sky, the drink of water that becomes a rope ladder, the weight of your keys in your palm, reminding your muscles that they still know something, the smallest possible next step, not the heroic one, because heroics sink fast, a breath you count wrong but count anyway, a word you borrow from someone else's mouth until your own starts working again. You do not climb out like a champion. You ooze out. You spill onto firmer ground. And when you finally move, it is not a dragon slain. It is a system rebooted. The light turns green again, or maybe it never changed. The door clicks. The pen scratches. The elevator hums. No one applauds. A few people look away, pretending they never noticed. That is fine. The pit is not a place for applause. It is a place that teaches you how thin the membrane is between control and collapse, and how often it is mercy, not strength, that closes the gap. Some glitches are loud and cinematic. The helplessness pit is quiet, domestic, disturbingly normal. It is the glitch that waits for ordinary people on ordinary days and asks nothing more than this: stop moving, stay small, and hope the world forgets you. And the most haunting part is how often the world obliges. Start with the hum. It finds you before the hallway does, a low vibration in your teeth, the kind that makes the world feel like it is running just a fraction of a frame off. You step into the corridor, and the air is too still, as if the building forgot how to breathe. Fluorescent light bars spool out overhead like bones, a rib cage of buzzing white, and floor tiles march onward in loyal formation. You tell yourself the end is close. It always looks close. In that cheap way distance fakes itself under bright lighting. Your footsteps arrive a moment late, like a poorly dubbed scene. The echo does not match you. It belongs to someone else, and almost you, stepping in the same rhythm, but with a stubborn delay. When you stop, it takes one extra step. You listen for the second footfall, but there is only that persistent hum and the ceiling fixtures vibrating with their secret insect patience. There is a door on the left with a window of smoked glass. Behind it, a figure passes. Not a person exactly, but the idea of one. Pale face, hair pulled tight. An office badge catching light. She moves left to right, and then left to right, and then left to right again. Each pass identical down to the purse strap that slips from her shoulder, the way she lifts her hand to push it back, the same strand of hair misbehaving at the temple. You try to look away because it is embarrassing to see a loop so nakedly. When you look back, she has stopped moving, but the purse strap keeps falling, and her hand keeps lifting, and her eyes fail to land on you even when her face points straight ahead. You walk on because that is what a hallway is for. The carpet darkens, then lightens, then darkens again, repeating a pattern that pretends to be variety. A man appears ahead, carrying a cardboard box. He moves toward you, smiling too hard, teeth showing like bright tiles. He nods hello, and you catch the faint tremor of his head. A nervous tick, except it is not nervous. It is mechanical. A tiny reset at the base of his skull. He passes you, and the hum shifts. A second later, he passes you again. Same smile, same box, same stuttering nod. You turn to question him, but a third version slips by, and now there is no one to ask because they are only iterations, and this is not about answers. It is about endurance. There is a red exit sign wearing the wrong shade, more pink than red, its arrow pointing in both directions if you squint. You do not squint. You trust your eyes for as long as they remain yours. On your right, a framed photo of a team in matching shirts beams at you. 12 faces that are actually only 4 faces copied 3 times. The second from the left is the same as the fourth on the right. Only the freckles have been rearranged like a different shuffle of the same deck. The air tastes like old pennies and warmed plastic. You check your phone even though you know the screen will show the time trapped, not moving, stuck between 1 minute and the next, as though the numbers have reached a cliff edge and cannot imagine a way forward. Messages sent are marked as delivered to people who do not exist anymore, or never did. Your reflection on the black glass is a second late to blink. It blinks anyway. You tell yourself the floor is level, but your calf muscles whisper that you are climbing. This thought arrives like a visitor, persistent and smiling, and refuses to leave. You are climbing, though your eyes say otherwise. The ceiling feels lower, the lights are brighter. Your teeth hurt worse. You try a door, and it is not a door. It is paint pretending to be a door, a rectangle of promise with a metal handle printed into it, flat to the touch. When you look again, it has seams and a lock and decades of scuffs. You choose not to check twice. A voice clears its throat somewhere behind you. You turn quickly because turning slowly would feel like submitting. The hallway behind is the hallway ahead, perfectly mirrored except for the detail of yourself standing far away, facing you, also deciding whether to submit. You lift your hand. The far you lifts a heartbeat later and holds it there as though waiting for direction. You would wave, but you are not that brave. Not yet. There is no rush. There is also only rush. Your body decides that language is not helping and reverts to motion. Step, step, step. The hum climbs a half note, then another, like a fluorescent choir learning how to scream. The ceiling flickers, and for a breath, you see things between the frames. A woman with her mouth open too wide, soundless as a television on mute. A cluster of people facing the wall as if listening for instructions. A man kneeling to tie a shoelace that has no loose end. The light's steady and these things are gone, or they are merely choosing not to be seen. By now, you could swear you smell rain. There is no weather here. The vents exhale something colder than air. Your skin prickles and every hair along your arms decides to stand as a single organism. Ahead, the corridor tightens, then loosens, then tightens again, a throat clearing. Your shoulder brushes a wall it should not touch. You whisper apology to no one and to the building itself, to its stud walls and caged wires and electric nerves. When the floor slips minutely and your foot finds the same tile it left half a minute ago, you finally allow yourself to name it. Not haunted, not cursed, glitched. You have always known this place the way a tongue knows a cracked tooth. The trick is not to fight the loop, but to step slightly wrong inside it, to misalign in the way only a human can. You shift your pace, you count the lights in out-of-order numbers, you hum along, off-key, on purpose. And in the not-quite silence between one buzz and the next, a door opens that you were not looking at, and a draft touches your face like a hand that is almost warm, and somewhere you cannot see, the hallway changes its mind about being endless. A red dot blinked inside the smoke detector, the only sign that the room was watching. We called it a hidden camera test, a simple trial to measure awareness and honesty. Walk into a staged apartment, find what looks out of place, report it on your way out. Nothing spooky, nothing paranormal, just a quiet experiment in human attention. The first volunteer arrived early, a man with a clean part and a denim jacket. He sat on the couch, scanned the magazines, and tapped his foot. For a while, he did nothing at all. Then he smoothed his hair and stood, walked to the kitchen, opened the empty fridge, and closed it. He returned to the couch, crossed his legs, and looked left. Then he did it again. Same pauses, same foot tap, same glance left like a metronome at the exact same beat. The room was silent except for the soft groan of the old HVAC and that blinking dot, and still it felt as if we were watching a loop on repeat. When he finally left, he insisted he had been inside for only a handful of minutes. The clock on the wall said it was nearly an hour. His pockets were empty. He took nothing. He saw nothing. He simply repeated. The second volunteer wore a bright scarf and carried a tote bag. She noticed details immediately. The crooked painting, the unlabeled spice jars, a potted fern with dry soil. She narrated to herself as she moved under her breath, like she was tracking points on a map. Then suddenly she stopped in the hallway. Without warning, she turned to the mirror and began to smile. The smile was too broad, too sudden. It held for a breath, then snapped off like a mask. She turned again, walked to the kitchen, and poured an invisible drink into an empty glass. The motion was perfect. Tilt, pause, tilt back. No liquid, no sound. She even tapped the non-existent bottle on the rim in a little flourish, as if to shake out the last drop. She raised the empty glass, took a sip that never happened, then set it down with a clink that never came. Afterward, when asked what made her stop in the hallway, she said there was a laugh, a deep laugh right behind her. We replayed the audio. There was only the HVAC and the faint scrape of her shoes. We added a hallway camera for the third round, tucked behind a vent, angled at the front door. The subject was a college kid with nervous energy. He wore headphones. He hummed as he paced, glancing at his phone. He never took the headphones off. In the hallway feed, a neighbor passed by, an older man carrying groceries. The neighbor paused at our door and stared at the peephole like he could see through it. He lifted his bag slightly and lowered it. He lifted it again. The same weight, the same expression, the same little exhale. 3 lifts in a row, perfectly matched. Then he walked away. the bag swinging without rhythm down the hall. When the subject left, the neighbor came back, stood in the same spot, and touched the knob, not turning, just touching. He held that pose for so long, the camera auto-dimmed and the infrared filter ticked on. When the lights brightened again, his hand still rested on the cool metal, and he was smiling at nothing. We moved to a different building the next day. New layout, new furniture, same rules. One woman entered, looked directly at the detector, and said hello. She circled the room without blinking. Her pupils were huge. At the sink, she washed her hands, air and all, and then she washed them again in the same pattern. Palms, backs, thumbs, wrists, rinse, no water, no soap. When she left, we found faint wet prints on the counter, as if someone had dried dripping hands on the edge and then vanished. By the fourth day, we stopped thinking about attention and honesty. We started timing steps and matching movements, searching for seams. Small acts repeated like someone had pressed rewind on a human moment. A shoulder twitch that arrived on cue. A laugh that clicked in too late. A reflection that lagged a heartbeat behind the face it copied. It was never grand. It was never dramatic. It was the soft wrongness of a sentence with one word out of order. A melody played just a little flat. On the final afternoon, we reset the room, powered down, and left the cameras rolling for the last test. No volunteer, no neighbor. Just a quiet apartment and the blinking dot. For 10 long minutes, nothing moved. Then the bathroom light flicked on. No door sound, no footsteps. The mirror caught a figure crossing, shoulder to shoulder, with an unseen person who was not there. The towel lifted, folded itself once, and gently fell. You can say faulty wiring. You can say a draft. You can say someone slipped in when the lock did not catch. You can say all of that and more, but it is harder to explain what happened when we check the footage of ourselves, the control feed we never thought to watch. In it, we stood around the monitor, arguing about angles. I rubbed my temple. He pointed at the screen. She reached for the dial. Then we did it again. Same breath, same gesture, same overlapping speech. 3 perfect repeats, like a stutter in time, and then the world went on. We said we were tired. We said stress. We said we did not notice because we were not looking. And maybe that is all a glitch wants. A moment you are sure you understand. A beat you are too busy to examine, so it can play itself again, smooth as a blink, quiet as a red dot in a silent room. Your mouth moves, and the voice that returns is not yours. It is yours in pitch and timbre, sure, but it lags by a breath, like a puppeteer who has forgotten the cadence of the act. That is where this begins, not with horror, not with blood, but with a wrongness so small you could mistake it for a hiccup. He works in a room where the air never changes, where the hum of machines turns hours into a single long note. New headsets arrive, sleek and glossy, promising clarity. He slips one on and feels the little padded cushions seal him into a private world. When he speaks, his words come back in his ear, just a hair too late, a soft echo laid over the real thing. The techs say it is a software tweak, a temporary buffer to smooth out noise. He nods because that makes sense. The delay is only a sliver of a second, nothing to worry about. By late morning, the delay starts to chew his sentences. He reaches for a customer's name, and his tongue trips, his mouth waiting for the ghost of his own voice to catch up and give permission to continue. He slows down. He over-enunciates. He splits words into pieces, feeds them into the line, and listens for them to come back stamped and approved. Each call stretches. His jaw aches. The echo teaches him a new rhythm, so slight and so strict that, without meaning to, he rearranges himself to obey it. When his lunch break comes, he pulls the headset off and waits for the world to snap back into place. It does not. He orders soup, and when he says thank you, he hears himself say it again, just behind the first one, as if there is a second throat inside him, mimicking him with the confidence of someone who has rehearsed while he slept. He tries to laugh it off. The laugh arrives on time, but it lands in his ears as something else's footsteps. Something shifts in the body when the feedback lies. Think about walking down a staircase and how your foot expects one more step that is not there. Your stomach drops, your chest jolts, and for a moment, the world has no floor. He feels that, but sideways, in language and movement. He reaches for a glass. The fingers close a fraction early, and he knocks it over. He types a simple sentence and his hand stutters on the keyboard because the click comes a beat later than the tap. He tries to clip his nails and nick skin because the sound of the clip misses the bite. Tiny misalignments stack like coins until they weigh as much as a brick. At home, he decides to prove to himself that this is nothing. He sits in front of his phone and records himself reading a children's book, something he knows by heart. He listens back and hears a man who hesitates in places that have never had pauses. He hears his own name inserted between lines, quietly, like an audience member calling out a cue. It is not supernatural. It is worse. It is procedural. His brain has learned a loop, and now it demands to run. Sleep should scrub it clean. Instead, he dreams he is learning to whistle again. In the dream, he hears the whistle before he shapes it. He wakes, and the whistle is still there, only it is not a whistle. It is the fridge cycling, the pipes turning over, the building settling into morning. Every sound he did not notice now feels like the world speaking back with a lag, and he searches for the right place to respond. He goes without headphones for a day. No music, no calls unless he can put them on speaker. By afternoon, the edges soften, and he dares to think the loop is dying. He heads out, crosses the street at the light, and it happens again. Not in his ears, but everywhere. The crosswalk chirp arrives early. His foot moves late. The car appears exactly when the voice in his head says, "Step." He stops dead on the paint and swallows a scream that would also arrive behind schedule. Here is the most unsettling part. This is not a haunting. This is compliance. His nervous system has been trying, with love and diligence, to line up cause and effect. It notices the gap and stretches itself to fill it. It succeeds, and in its success, it unthreads the simple miracle of intuition. The next time he speaks, he is careful, but he is careful forever now. The next time he drinks water, he watches the stream like a pilot landing in crosswind. The next time he hears his name, he waits to know which version of the call is the one he is supposed to answer. He tells a friend it is fine, he is fine, just tired. The words are true, and a fraction late. He hears them arrive and settle like a coin in a vending machine that refuses to vend. Your body trusts what it is told, even when what it is told is wrong. Tell it wrong for long enough, and it will carry that lie with reverence. That is how a glitch becomes a habit. That is how a shadow voice becomes the one that speaks first. The door clicked shut, and the room swallowed its own echo. I lowered into the water, and it took me like a second skin, a gentle hand that wanted nothing but stillness. No light, no clock, just the sound of my breath stepping forward like it had been waiting its whole life to be heard. Minutes don't pass in a straight line in there. They slip, double back, repeat. My mind tried to be helpful. It offered a hallway from childhood, the whisper of an air vent that doesn't exist, the soft creak of a stair that always knew who was coming home. A shape like a memory hovered in the dark behind my eyes, and the strangest part wasn't seeing it. It was how ready I was to believe it. A tiny drip tapped the left side of the tank. I turned, even though there was nothing to turn toward. The water held me, patient. It tapped again, now to the right, then above. I felt my chest tighten. I said, "Hello," like I'd bumped into someone in a hallway. No one answered, and I remembered there was no hallway. Only me. Only this. Here's what the isolation tank reveals. Emptiness is never empty. Your brain is a tireless stagehand. When the inputs go quiet, it rushes in with props and lines and exits, determined to keep the scene from falling apart. You don't reach silence. You meet your own narrator. Psychologically, your mind hates blank space and starts projecting memories and patterns to keep the story going, especially when it has nothing new to work with. So, the glitches begin, not supernatural, but still disturbing. You go to scratch your ankle and can't find your ankle. The boundary between skin and space liquefies, and you learn your sense of where I end is a constant negotiation between nerves and world. A flash of light arcs across the nothing, not from outside, but from the inside of your seeing. You count to keep steady. 1, 2, 3. And somehow, you're at 19 without crossing 4. Time stops approaching like a line and becomes a room you can walk around in, knocking on the walls for an exit. I thought of a friend who once confessed in a small voice, "I'm not afraid of the dark, I'm afraid of the ideas it invites." In the tank, the ideas knocked like old neighbors. Did you forget to lock the door? Did you send that message? Why did she say it that way? Your mind, unchaperoned, goes straight for the unsorted drawer. Here's the comment that stung last week. Here's the face you wish you remembered better. Here's the version of you that still waits for permission to rest. And there's another glitch, subtler, the kind where you hear a voice in your head that sounds like your own. Only it's honest in a way you are not with yourself in daylight. It tells you what you know and avoid. It repeats the truth until you stop pretending you can't hear it. You want to climb out. Not because the tank is frightening, but because you realize the room you avoid is inside you, and the water politely forced a house tour. If there's a lesson here, it's not to fear the machine for making mistakes. It's to notice how it repairs them. Every false drip, every phantom glow, every missing ankle is your brain practicing a question. How do I stitch a world when the thread is gone? The answer arrives quietly, through your body. You breathe, you float. You choose not to argue with what isn't there. Little by little, the stagehand stops running and sits beside you, both of you looking at the empty set, admitting it's enough for now. When the door opens again, sound returns like weather. The air feels loud and ordinary. You step out, blinking, surprised at how heavy a towel can be, how bright a hallway is, how solid your name sounds when someone says it. The glitches don't follow. They recede like mist. But something about your listening is different. You can hear the hum under the day's chatter. You can feel the seam where feeling becomes story. You can sense the moment a stray shadow on a wall nearly became a ghost in your head, but didn't, because you saw the stitch happening as it happened. People say the tank shows you nothing. Maybe that's true. But it's the kind of nothing that turns you toward the everything you quietly carry. And once you've been held by that level of quiet, even for a short while, it nudges the way you move through noise. It can change how you see the world and how you hear yourself inside it. It starts as the weight of a hand that isn't there, not a chill, not a breeze, just a soft pressure on the shoulder, like someone asking you to wait. You turn, because of course you turn. And the room is only a room, the air only air. The imprint fades, but it leaves a shape in your mind. Your skin remembers it, even if nothing touched you. The next time, it is a brush across the forearm. You pull your sleeve down, you pretend it was a stray hair or a thread, and you keep walking. Then it is the small of your back, a careful steadying at the top of a staircase, firm enough to make you step faster, kind enough to make you trust it for a split second. And that is when the thought arrives, quiet and unwelcome. What if your body can be fooled by itself? People think the skin is a boundary. Most days it is. On some days, it is a screen. Inside your skull, a map of you is always running, flashing signals where your eyes expect them, filling in gaps, predicting patterns. When the wires hum just right, the map wins over the world. You feel what the map tells you to feel. That is phantom touch, the ghost in the circuitry, a sensation with no source you can point at. You try to explain it, and it sounds like superstition, so you keep notes for yourself. It happens when you are tired, It happens when you forget to eat. It happens when the room is loud and you have been pretending to be fine for too long. Sometimes it happens when you are happy, which is worse. You will be laughing at a story, and suddenly it is a fingertip tracing your wrist. Intimate, familiar, impossible. Your voice falters. You put your hands in your pockets to anchor yourself to the weight of real fabric. A doctor listens. You are ready for the smirk, but it does not come. They say the brain is generous with illusions. They tell you about people who feel a missing arm itch. They tell you about people who watch someone get touched and feel the same touch bloom on their own skin. They tell you it is not madness, it is misfire, stress, lack of sleep, a nervous system tuned too tight. Breathe, ground yourself, speak kindly to the body that keeps trying to predict the future. You leave with that and a list of tricks. Name 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, 3 sounds you can hear. Tell your feet the floor is beneath them. Tell your hands the table is a table. You try it in the supermarket when a phantom palm presses the back of your neck between the cleaning aisle and the cereal boxes. You whisper the names of colors like prayers. The touch fades. The world returns. But it does not stop visiting. It waits at the edges of quiet moments, a draft through a window that is firmly shut. In the shower, it is a line down your spine long before the water reaches you. In bed, it is the dip of the mattress beside your hip. Some nights, you lie still and listen for a second breath, even though you know better. The mind that can invent a kiss can invent a phantom. Here is the truth you keep repeating until it is less frightening. Your body is not haunted. It is overprotective. It is a guard dog barking at shadows because once, long ago, that bark kept something bad from crossing a threshold. It learned to imagine the hand before the hand arrived. It learned so well that now it does it without asking you. There are days when this makes you soft toward it. A touch that is not real can still be a message that is. Rest, it says. Slow down, it says. Pay attention. And on the hardest days, when the invisible thumb prints into the hollow below your collarbone and makes your breath stutter, you speak back. You say, "Thank you, but not now." You open a window. You call a friend. You step outside and let the wind give you a touch that belongs to the weather. Once, on a train, a stranger's coat sleeve grazes yours, and you feel 2 sensations at once, the velvet of fabric and the old familiar echo. You do not flinch. You remember there is a difference, the map and the world, overlapping, arguing, learning again how to share the same space. You watch the city slide by the window. You count the beats of your heart until they settle. Somewhere between stations, the ghost lets go. You keep going. Something strange happens when a screen starts finishing your thoughts for you. The scroll feels effortless. The headlines feel tailor-made, and a small jolt hits your chest like a whisper that says, "This matters." That's the moment the glitch begins. Not in the app, in us. Picture this. It's late. The room is quiet except for the blue light on your face. A clip flashes by. A shaky video, a voiceover that sounds confident. Words stamped across the frame like a warning. Your thumb pauses. Your body leans in a tiny bit. Before the mind checks the facts, the feeling writes the story. You send it to a friend with a line that starts, "Just in case." The feed is not just content. It's a mirror angled to catch our weak spots. Fear, it offers urgency. Curiosity, it offers novelty. Loyalty, it offers a tribe to cheer with. Inside that mix, the glitch is simple. Feelings fire first, and then the mind races to justify. Psychologically, this works because our brains crave patterns and certainty, even if the pattern is flimsy and the certainty is borrowed. Here's how it looks in real life. Your cousin drops a message. "Doctors confirm this new food is toxic. Share immediately." You type back, "Where's it from?" They reply, "Everyone's talking about it." That phrase feels like proof. It isn't. It's momentum. And momentum is sticky. When a claim moves fast, our sense of cause and effect kicks in. We assume that if so many people are passing it along, there must be a solid reason behind it. Our minds love a tidy chain. This happened, therefore that. But tidy doesn't equal true. The most disturbing part is how normal the behavior feels. No cackling villain, no grand conspiracy board, just ordinary people, half awake, half alarmed, tapping share because it feels like being helpful. That's the glitch. It dresses like care. It sounds like vigilance. It spreads because it feels like we're doing the right thing. There's a way to slow it. Before the share, add a beat. Not a dramatic pause, just a breath long enough to surface the mechanism. Name it. Say quietly, this post is leaning on fear. Or, this claim is using repetition to feel true. Or, this is flattering my group and shaming another. When we name the lever being pulled, the spell loosens. Words give shape to the fog, and once it has a shape, we can examine it. Then, ask a handful of grounding questions. Who stands to gain if I believe this? What would change my mind if I'm wrong? If I swap the groups in this story, would it still feel convincing? If all I had was the headline, what's missing that a full picture would include? None of this needs to be fancy. It just needs to be done before the reflex. And if you still want to send it, change what you send. Instead of forwarding the claim, forward the pause. Saw this, feels alarming. I'm checking if it's credible. We'll share a source if it is. That turns sharing into care without becoming a megaphone for things that haven't earned the volume. Over time, that tiny rewrite tells your brain a new story. Urgency without panic, curiosity without gullibility, loyalty without blinders. This is not about becoming cynical. It's about becoming precise. About choosing when our attention is a gift and when it's a fuse. The feed will keep refreshing. The world will keep throwing us sharp headlines and slippery clips. We can't stop the river, but we can delete the glitch that makes us lunge after every splash. Most of us want to be the friend who helps, the neighbor who warns, the stranger who looks out for others. That's still possible. Slower, kinder, smarter, a breath, a name, a question. Then the choice to send light instead of static. In a space built to amplify everything, restraint is not silence, it's signal. The first rule was simple. Do not press the red button. It sat in the center of a clean white table. No label, no guard, just a bright dot begging for a fingertip. People came in, signed a release, took a seat, and tried to ignore it. We called it the red button game. It looked like a joke. It was not. They were told to wait. No phone, no book, no music. Just a camera in the corner, a glass wall, a chair, and the button. If they lasted the full 15 minutes, they'd walk out with a neat envelope. Some smiled, some rolled their eyes, but they all sat down thinking the same thing. Easy money. The first glitch showed up with the barista. She lasted almost to the end. Her legs shook, but her hand stayed in her lap. Then she pressed it. A soft click, nothing dramatic. She blinked, looked around, and said, "I guess that's it." Then said it again in the exact same tone, like an echo that did not come from the room. When I played back the footage, both sentences layered perfectly. No delay. One voice, twice. She never noticed. The retired teacher drew a line down the center of the table with his finger, over and over. He whispered something to himself. When the timer buzzed, he laughed, stood to leave, then stopped, sat back down, and pressed the button, even though the session was over. His mouth smiled before his eyes did, like his face received the command in pieces. Later, he swore he had never touched it. A runner came in, sweaty and focused. She told us she loved self-control. She sat cross-legged, breathing deep, watching the door. On minute 12, she leaned forward, then paused. We saw her lower her hand, freeze, and then skip a tiny fraction forward like a cut in a film we did not make. Her fingertip was already on the button. The audio was fine. Her body was not. The strangest were the pairs, because the room was only meant for one. Yet the man in the flannel shirt brought someone else. On the live feed, we saw only him. On the mirrored cabinet behind him, we saw two of him. The reflection lagged a hair behind, like it was thinking about what to be. When he pressed the button, both versions pressed, but the sound happened before the movement. He left quietly. We all pretended the cabinet was warped. The cabinet was not warped. We learned patterns. The press did not act like a switch. It behaved like a cue. After the click, a person might repeat a phrase, or jump time, or stare at the camera as if they had just woken up from inside their own head. One man asked, "How long have I been here?" 3 times, then held his breath, waiting for a response that had not been asked for. Another squeezed his eyes shut and counted to 10. He finished at 9, opened his eyes, and nodded like the world had landed in a new alignment. Sometimes the room responded. The fluorescent hum dropped low and then rose too fast. The air vent rattled, paused, rattled again with the exact same cadence. The glass wall showed the light reflection, then held it 1 second longer than the wall itself, like a memory refusing to leave. It was never violent. It was never loud. It was always wrong in ways you could not report without sounding unwell. I took the night shift often. The building was quiet, and the game was simple. Watch, record, log. The last subject before dawn was a young guy with steady hands. He folded them, stared at the button, and whispered that he did not believe in magic. He lasted 14 minutes and a breath. When he pressed it, the camera did not flicker. My reflection did. I watched myself lean forward on the control room glass a moment before I actually did. It felt like my body had been pre-written by someone with clumsy hands. We stopped telling people about the envelope. We stopped timing. We told them only the rule: do not press the red button. People still pressed. They said the silence felt heavy, like a pause in a story that needed to be filled. They said the button asked nicely. One woman stood to leave, touched the doorknob, and then walked back and pressed without looking. She apologized to the air and started to cry. For what, she could not say. I kept a journal. I wrote down patterns, whispers, ticks, and tells. On the last page, I noticed my handwriting loops back on itself, like I had copied a sentence from a page that wasn't there. The entry ends with my own words repeated twice. Same ink, same pressure, same line. I never write anything twice. There is a red button on the table. It does not control anything you can point to. Maybe it does not control anything at all. Maybe pressing it hands your life one empty frame that your mind rushes to fill with something it recognizes. Maybe that is all a glitch is, a kindness, a patch, a way to keep the story moving forward when the scene did not load. If you were here, you would promise not to touch it. You would sit with your hands in your lap and your eyes on the door. You would repeat that you were stronger than a small red circle. You would listen to the hum and count your breaths and bite your lip and think of your reward. You would feel nothing change when you finally give in. And later, when you tell yourself you did not press it, your voice will arrive first and your eyes will catch up, and you will know softly that something else is doing the driving. They dim the lights until the walls forget their edges, and the room becomes a soft box where reality goes to loosen its laces. A chair waits in the center, not a machine, not a trap, just a place where the mind meets its own reflection without a mirror. You sit because that is what you were told. A hum starts low, like an engine you cannot see, not loud. More like the air itself is vibrating from somewhere far beneath the floor. They place the headphones gently, and the sound turns into a curtain, a steady blanket of hiss and breath. Your vision adapts to the half-light. Your heartbeat becomes a metronome that refuses to pick a speed, slow, then not slow, then something in between, as if the needle is wobbling. They call this process clean, controlled, repeatable. They call it a way to coax the brain into showing its seams. No commands, no hypnosis, just the slightest nudge. They say the brain hates empty space. It will build a scaffold from nothing if it must. You blink and notice the afterimage of the room, hanging like a shadow that forgot to disappear. You blink again, and the shadow misremembers the chair. You are told to count your breathing. In, float, out, drift. That is when the first glitch arrives. It is not a vision, not at first. It is the certainty that someone else just entered, even though the only movement is your chest. The hum catches a rhythm that feels like footsteps, and your mind does what it was born to do. It solves the pattern by inventing the visitor. There is a shape in the corner, the kind that could be a coat or a person, and your eyes decide for you. It sways, and you discover you have been holding your breath. They ask what you see. The honest answer is, you see everything too much. The ceiling grain turns alive and crawls. The air gathers a shimmer like heat over a highway. A flicker happens in the edge of your sight, and you turn to catch it. It retreats. You turn back. It returns. It is coy, this flicker, like a playful ghost that knows the rules better than you do. The rules are simple. The moment you try to look directly, it steps aside. Time begins to act like a hallway mirror, repeating the same stretch in a way that feels almost cruel. You hear a voice say your name. It is your name, the exact tempo your friends use, the tilt your mother gave it when you were in trouble. You answer, and the answer sounds wrong, too close. Like your mouth is inside your skull twice. They note something on a clipboard. The pen has an insistence to it, a scratch that becomes a second rhythm inside the hum. Scratch, hiss, breath, beat. The scaffold grows a room, and in that room, something begins to move. You feel a touch on your forearm where there is no hand. It is the memory of a hand, a pressure without weight. You do not know if you flinched or if the flinch happened to you. The chair creaks once, accusingly. You apologize to it in your head, quietly. The way you apologize to the stove when you bump your hip. The brain loves a ritual, and so it gives you one. Repeat a word, any word, and each time you say it, it shreds a little more meaning off, until what is left is a pure shape of sound. It is startling how quickly a familiar word turns into a strange object no one told you how to hold. A face gathers itself from the grain of the door. It is not sinister. That would be easy. It is neutral. It looks at you with the calm of a bus schedule. You blink, and it does not go away. It waits patiently to be named. You do not give it a name. You look down. Your hands are waiting too, like passengers who boarded the wrong train. Your right hand is convinced it belongs to the left. You laugh without thinking, and the laugh sounds like another person learned it by ear. They ask how long you have been in the chair. You guess. You are wrong. Whether you said too long or not long enough does not matter. Time has folded into a pocket. When they lift the headphones and the hum recedes, you feel the room inflate back into shape like a lung. The edges return to the walls. The corner becomes a coat again. The face dissolves back into wood. You stand, and your legs do that tiny negotiation with gravity that says, "Remember me." There is a final glitch that always arrives late. Later that night, when the world is normal again, the fridge buzz is just a fridge buzz, and the streetlight is just a streetlight. You will turn off your lamp and see the afterimage of your room float for a breath, and then slip taffy-like into a figure that isn't there. It will not frighten you. It will feel like a friend leaning in to share a joke. You will think, very softly, you again. And your brain, faithful and inventive, will do what it does best. It will answer back. A glitch doesn't always look like sparks or a screen freezing. Sometimes it's a hand hovering over a door handle, as if the metal might bite. A simple sentence turns into fog in the throat. A cashier wishes you a good morning, and your mouth replies, "You too," even though it makes no sense. The body stutters, the mind blinks, and nothing obvious is wrong. Here's the strange part. There is no visible cage around us, yet our nerves behave like they just grazed an electric fence. One memory of being laughed at. One surprise reprimand in front of a crowd. One moment that jolted us. Then the map redraws itself. This is the shock cage, an invisible perimeter taught by tiny jolts, where perfectly normal moments become high voltage. Picture a meeting. You have a clear thought that could help, and a calm plan for how to say it. When the window opens, your chest tightens. The tongue slows down. A word stalls, then another, and suddenly you choose silence, because silence feels safer than stumbling. No one scolds you, no one even notices. But the relief you feel is the real trainer. Your system logs a note. When you don't speak, you don't get shocked. Next time, the window opens, and your body closes it faster. Psychologically, that's conditioning at work. The brain pairs a context with a threat, and avoidance gets rewarded with relief, which tightens the loop one more notch. That loop can look like freezing, like repeating a phrase, like smiling when you want to object, or like your hand refusing to move until the moment passes. It's not weakness, it's learned safety, misapplied. Now, take a smaller scene. A friend invites you to speak at a small gathering. You agree, and then the day arrives. It's just a living room, a few chairs, soft lamps. When you stand, your thoughts fragment. The face in front of you blurs into an old principle, an old boss, an old no. The glitch isn't random, it's your nervous system refusing to step into a square where it remembers a shock. Here's the pivot. The cage isn't locked. The latch clicks open the moment you stop treating the glitch like a verdict and start treating it like a signal. Call it what it is, gently. Name the glitch out loud, not as an apology, but as a bridge back to yourself. You might say, "Give me a second, my brain just buffered." Or, "I lost the word." I'm going to say one sentence and then pause. Naming reduces the static and returns choice to your hands. There's a reason this helps. When you acknowledge the surge, the amped-up circuitry no longer has to hide. Your system shifts from bracing for impact to watching what's actually happening. The body loves clarity. It softens under clear signals. Small, physical anchors amplify this. Pressing both feet into the floor, letting the jaw unclench, sending the exhale a little longer than the inhale. These aren't magic tricks. They're quiet messages to a jumpy guard dog that the yard is safe. From there, reclaim inches, not miles. In the meeting, commit to one sentence, then stop, let the air hold you, and add one more. At the dinner, ask one real question instead of rehearsing a perfect story. When the automatic you too leaps out, smile, catch it, and follow with what you meant. Every time you step into the square and nothing terrible happens, the current drops. The brain updates the map, the perimeter moves. We don't erase our shocks, we outgrow their authority. The goal isn't to become fearless, it's to become fluent at reading the tremor and choosing anyway. Each tiny choice is a file rewrite, saving over old scripts with kinder ones. Yes, the glitch will visit. Sometimes it will arrive right on cue, sometimes on a random Tuesday. When it does, meet it with a nod. You're not broken, you're trained, and you're retraining. One day you'll notice the moment that used to jolt you is quiet now. The door handle is just metal. The room is just people. Your voice steps out and stays. Not because the world changed, but because you did. The shock cage is still there in memory, a faint grid on old paper. But the new map is wider, brighter, and it's drawn by your hand. The strangest glitch doesn't crash your phone. It crashes your courage. You can feel it when a room goes quiet and every face tilts the same way, as if synchronized by something invisible. Your thought lifts its hand and then, somehow, lowers it. You're sure you noticed a crack in the plan, a shadow at the edge of the path. But the group smiles, and the glitch hums, and you swallow the warning. Here's the shift. This isn't loyalty, it's latency. When groups move too smoothly, our brains default to agreement, not truth. The fix isn't shouting over people, it's introducing one breath of friction, naming the trap, and asking for a second look. Psychologically, reframing the moment like this creates safety and opens the door to better thinking because it tells everyone the goal isn't to win, it's to see clearly. Picture a weekday meeting. A team is celebrating a new rollout. The timeline is tight, the energy is high, and someone says, "We can skip a few checks to make the deadline." Heads nod, the leader claps the table, then a quiet voice near the back clears their throat. "I think we're in a groupthink trap. What's the worst thing that happens if we're wrong?" The air changes. A few eyes lift from their screens. Suddenly, people remember the old incident. The warning email from last month, the test they planned to run and then forgot. The leader pauses and says, "Okay, let's spend 2 minutes listing risks." In those 2 minutes, the plan shifts just enough to avoid a mistake that would have cost days. That's all it took. One person naming the trap, and one question that invited the room to step out of sync and back into judgment. Notice how making the abstract concrete, a real moment, a real sentence, shows exactly how to apply the idea. Why does that work? Because groups are powerful mirrors. We read each other to know what's safe. When someone gives permission to look again, it lowers defenses and turns attention toward truth rather than approval. Psychologically, this simple move changes the story the room is telling itself, and people become more open to adding facts, sharing doubts, and pointing to the thing everyone has been avoiding. You don't need data to bulldoze feelings. You need safety to unlock data. Another scene. It's late, you and your friends are on a street you don't know well, and someone suggests a shortcut. Everyone laughs and follows. The map says the alley saves a few minutes. The lights say otherwise. Your gut whispers no. You catch up and say, "Before we turn in, name one reason to keep going and one reason to circle back." It's an odd sentence, almost out of place, but it slows the momentum just enough for someone else to admit the alley makes them uneasy too. One person checks the map again and realizes there's a better lit route that adds only a few blocks. The crowd pivots. No drama, no heroics. Just a tiny interruption that stopped the glitch from steering the night. The default is to go along. The upgrade is to go along only with your eyes open. It is not rebellion for the sake of noise. It is responsibility for the sake of accuracy. That is the reframe. Old way, nod and hope for the best. New way, add one honest beat of doubt on purpose. You can do it by naming the pattern. I think we're leaning into groupthink here, and by asking clarifying questions that make truth easier to speak. What would convince us we're wrong? What are we not measuring because it's inconvenient? Who benefits from this choice and who pays the cost? That tiny wedge of curiosity breaks the trance, and the room becomes smarter by choice, not by accident. The disturbing part of this glitch is how ordinary it feels. It doesn't announce itself with a siren. It arrives as a warm tide of agreement, patting you on the back, promising you belong. The fix is quiet too. A breath. A sentence. A willingness to be the first to step half a foot out of line. Not to be difficult, but to be accurate. Start small. When the hum rises and your thought tries to hide, let it speak. What are we missing? If the room is healthy, it will thank you. If it's not, you just found your most important data point. The crowd can be wise. The crowd can also be wrong. Your job isn't to fight the group. It's to keep it from glitching. One beat of courage. One clean question. That's enough to turn synchronized silence into honest signal and to keep all of us, awake. A thin strip of fabric with a clip can rearrange a room, pin it to a shirt, add a confident stride, and watch doors open, voices quiet, and rules bend. Not because anything magical happened, but because a costume whispered, "I'm in charge," and a part of us believed it. Authority costume is everywhere. A neon vest on a sidewalk, a lab coat in a hallway, a lanyard with a barcode no one scans. Even tone is a uniform, crisp, measured, less filler, more certainty. The human glitch lives in the way we treat symbols like proof. We outsource judgment to shortcuts because it saves effort. Psychologically, that makes sense. Our brains prize speed, so we rely on cues that feel safe and familiar. And authority is one of the strongest cues we have. Picture this. You're waiting for the elevator. A person in a reflective vest rounds the corner, holding a clipboard, eyes focused, voice steady. Stairs only for now. The door opens anyway. No alarms, no smoke. Still, most of us turn, feet obey before questions arrive. The vest speaks louder than the empty hallway. The clipboard is a permission slip you never signed. Or this. You're at a crowded event. Someone stands near a velvet rope with a headset, barely glancing up, just nodding people through. Someone asks where the restroom is, and the headset wearer lifts a finger, points, keeps moving. The crowd follows the finger like it's a lighthouse. If a stranger without the headset did the same, would it land the same way? Probably not. The costume carried the message. Here's what makes it unsettling. We don't just comply, we recategorize reality to match the costume. A sentence becomes policy. A suggestion reads like a rule. A pause feels like permission. And when the symbol is wrong, when a scammer prints a badge at home, when an abuser borrows the voice of certainty, that little glitch becomes a doorway for harm. There's a calmer way to handle it. We can keep the efficiency of cues without surrendering our agency. The move is simple. Pause for one breath to separate the symbol from the substance. Ask a low-friction question that checks for the real instruction underneath the costume. Quick check. Who's coordinating this? Got it. Which policy is that? The tone stays respectful, but you invite evidence to show up. Psychologically, that brief pause disrupts the automatic compliance loop and gives your slower, wiser thinking time to step in. You can also use the costume with care, not to manipulate, but to protect your boundaries. If you're leading a group, choose signals that make your role legible. Clear language, visible markers, steady pacing. It lowers confusion and raises trust when the outside matches the responsibility on the inside. And when you don't intend to lead, soften the symbols you're sending. Remove the headset vibe from your sentences. Swap "you need to" for "what if we tried." Clothing and cadence are a kind of interface. Tweak them, and you change how people respond. If you notice the costume working on you, don't shame yourself. This is a feature of being human, not a flaw. We live in crowds. We follow to move faster. The goal isn't to dismantle every symbol. It's to keep the keys to your own decisions. One breath, one gentle question, one look for proof. And if you do wear a costume today, the blazer, the badge, the practiced voice, let it be aligned with real care. Authority should feel like safety, not pressure. In a world full of quick cues and clever props, the most reliable signal still comes from congruence. What's on your shirt, what's in your voice, and what lives in your actions all telling the same story. That's not just a better look, that's the antidote to the glitch. The lock snicks behind you, a soft little sound that decides the rest of your life. Fluorescent light hums, the air tastes like paper and old coffee, and there's a metal chair that looks colder than it feels. You sit because sitting is what people do when they believe everything can still be explained. Then a stranger smiles like he has been here forever and says, "Tell me what happened." You start with the truth. You offer clean outlines, straight lines, times you are sure you were somewhere else. The man nods like a metronome and writes nothing down. Another man drifts in, places a cup near your hand, not quite close enough to touch. He says they already know. He says this will be easier if you help. The trap does not snap shut all at once. It inches forward, disguised as help, disguised as a shortcut back to normal. They show you a photo taken in bad light. They speak a detail that tastes familiar because they just fed it to you. A red jacket, a squeaky door, a name that barely fits your memory, but now sits inside it like a seed. The story they offer is crooked, but it has an ending. Your story is straight, but it has no ending, only more questions. Your brain wants an ending more than it wants the truth. Time rearranges itself in that room. Without a clock, your body cannot tell minutes from hours. Every pause feels like punishment. Every nod feels like approval. Your words get softer because soft words end conversations, and you want this one to end. Your mind scans for exits. There is only one exit they keep pointing to, and it has a sign over it that says, confession. People think confession means guilt. In here, it mostly means surrender. It means your head is a beehive and the buzzing is too loud, and you will say anything if someone promises quiet. It means you begin to borrow their words because your own words are tired. They say maybe you were angry. You say maybe. They say maybe you blacked out. You say maybe. They say maybe you did not mean it. You say you did not mean it. And then you hear what you just said and realize you have agreed to something too big to fit in your mouth. This is the glitch, the disturbing little fault line in the human model. We like to think memory is a recording. It is not. It is wet clay. It takes the shape of the last hand that touched it. Suggestion presses its thumb to the surface and leaves a print. And after enough prints, you cannot find the original surface anymore. You tell yourself you are just saying words to leave the room. You do not notice those words are building a room you will never leave. They lean forward when you agree with them. They lean back when you resist. You learn that leaning forward means relief. Relief becomes a kind of currency. You spend it recklessly. You imagine going home, the relief of a warm shower, the relief of sleep. Say you did it and you can go home, one of them whispers like a bedtime story. You do not ask go home when. You do not ask how guilt and home fit together. You choose the story with an ending. The end they give you comes with paper. They slide it across the table and say, write it down in your own words. You do, but the words are not yours anymore. They belong to the room. They belong to the pauses you could not stand, and the nods you were hungry for, and the pictures they moved closer until they felt like memories. You sign because signing is what people do when they want a thing to be over. Later, when you are alone and the humming light is gone, you try to rewind. You try to find the part where you broke. You remember the cup you never touched. You remember the moment you said maybe and watched it grow teeth. You replay the lock snicking behind you and realize that was the loudest sound in the world. You wonder why you did not stand up, why you did not ask for someone to watch, why you did not trust the roughness of the truth over the smoothness of a lie that felt like mercy. Listen, the confession trap is not a set of tricks. It is a mirror held close enough to fog with your breath. That fog can draw shapes. It can draw anything. If you look long enough, you will see a shape you know, even if it was never there. The most disturbing part is that you will believe it. And the moment you believe it, it becomes real enough to be signed, stamped, and kept in a folder with your name. And when someone asks later what happened, you will have to tell them the story that ends, because there is no path back to the one that does not. The first person stood up for no reason, and the room followed like a flock that had forgotten its wings. No bell, no instruction, just a ripple of knees and shuffling feet, as if some signal had threaded the air above our heads. I watched the wave crest toward me, and before my brain formed a sentence, my own legs lifted. I rose, embarrassed by how automatic it felt, as if my muscles had their own quiet plan. We were told only that it was a waiting area, that we'd be called soon, that the camera in the corner was for our safety. The walls were a soft gray that drank the light. The chairs were identical. A mirror took up one side and pretended to be just glass. The sign on the door had a cheerful tone that did not match the chill on my skin. Welcome to the peer pressure room. It sounded like a joke until the hum in my chest refused to laugh. A chime sounded, gentle and meaningless. Every person stood again. My body stood with them. Sit, chime, stand, sit, chime, stand. The rhythm smoothed into something pleasant, like breathing shared by strangers. I told myself I was being polite, joining a harmless little ritual to pass the time. But then the chime stopped, and the standing did not. The woman next to me glanced down at my hands, and I folded them in my lap like a scolded child, though no one had spoken. The speaker crackled. If the light turns red, touch your left ear. If it turns blue, cough once. We nodded collectively, a dozen heads moving as one. The bulb over the door blushed red. Fingers flew to ears. Blue. An awkward chorus of coughs. Red. Ears again. I watched the gestures arrive in my limbs a fraction of a second after the others, like my mind was streaming real life with a tiny delay. A man in a white shirt arrived late, breathless, apologizing. The rest of us had already learned the steps. He sat, confused. The red light flared and no one looked at him. He did not touch his ear. Silence pooled around him, as if he had shouted something obscene. I felt my face heating with secondhand shame. On the next red, he raised his hand to his ear, tentative at first, then smoother, like he had always known. The speaker asked us to switch seats, no reason given. We obeyed, shuffling in a slow, polite dance. A woman with freckles patted the empty chair beside her, as if inviting me to church. I sat where she wanted me. The man in the white shirt hesitated, then moved, checking our eyes for approval the way swimmers check a lifeguard. There was water on a tray at the far wall. The speaker said, "Water is for those who follow instructions." We laughed because the voice had that strange, friendly quality. Then we didn't laugh, because the voice wasn't joking. The man in the white shirt reached for a cup. A dozen throats tightened in unison. He pulled his hand back and waited. We waited with him, proud to be good. Next, a question. When the door opens, everyone point to the dot on the floor. There was no dot. But when the latch clicked, fingers rose and pointed to empty tile. The newcomer blinked at the nothing we insisted was there. He smiled, the way you do when you wish to be included. He pointed exactly where we pointed. Relief settled over us like a blanket fresh from a dryer. It felt warm. It smelled like conformity. The speaker offered a choice. Press the blue button and nothing happens. Press the red button and someone you cannot see will feel a harmless shock. We were reminded we could leave at any time. No one moved. One by one, we chose red, accompanied by tiny comments meant to wash us clean. It must be part of the test. It's barely a pinch. They would not offer it if it were truly bad. When the button reached me, it was already warm from so many hands. My thumb hovered. The room held its breath. I pressed red. After, the chime returned, and we stood as one, relieved to be back inside the simple script of up and down. The speaker thanked us. The door swung open. The mirror on the wall held our reflections like specimens in formaldehyde. Out in the corridor, a volunteer clipped a sticker to my shirt and told me I did great. I wanted to correct her. I wanted to ask who had been on the other side of the wall. I wanted to apologize to an empty dot on a clean floor. Instead, I walked with the others. Heavy shoes, polite smiles, a polite sea. You know the way your phone freezes for a heartbeat, then catches up and pretends nothing happened? Something like that clung to me for hours. Not a malfunction of a machine, but of a person who had borrowed his will from a room. My name still sounded like mine. My hands still looked like my hands. And yet, when I pictured the red light, my fingers tingled, ready, trained. The most disturbing glitch was not in the equipment, not in the wiring behind the mirror, not in the speaker with the calm voice. It was the program that runs when eyes meet eyes, when nobody wants to be the strange one, when standing feels safer than thinking. It was written in us, old code, efficient, ruthless, and so very smooth you can join it without noticing you have agreed. The first crack didn't sound like a scream. It sounded like a mispronounced name. Your barista, the one who has been spelling your name perfectly for years, hands over a cup with a new identity scrawled across the side and a smile that says, "Nothing is wrong." You shrug and taste the coffee. It is your usual order, and yet the sweetness arrives a heartbeat too late, like your tongue has forgotten the cue. You raise an eyebrow, then you let it go. Tiny things slip, brains skip, systems hiccup. You can trust that. By lunch, that trust is thinner. A coworker thanks you for an email you never sent. It is long, thoughtful, signed in your signature, and it references a meeting you didn't attend. You search your outbox, and there it is, a clean record with a timestamp that matches the foggy stretch of your morning. You try to locate the moment you wrote those sentences and find a blank wall where memory should be. Your coworker swears you were brilliant. You vow to check later. It is nothing. It is something. You keep moving. On the train home, a child points at you and calls you by a childhood nickname you have not spoken aloud in years. Her mother hushes her, apologizes, and says the girl is chatty with strangers. The car smells like metal and wet wool. The windows show your reflection in a thin, silvered layer over the tunnel. You practice a smile and watch it land a fraction after your mouth moves. You hold very still. It catches up. Trust is a quiet contract. It is the agreement that your face is your face, that your words belong to you, that your people remember you and you remember them the same way every day. It is the small belief that numbers will add up, that door codes will open the same locks, that your name will be spelled the way it has always been spelled. When it collapses, it never starts with an explosion. It starts with a whisper that asks, "Are you sure?" Your mother calls you by your sibling's name, and then, on the next breath, by your name, but by the wrong age. She pauses, mid-sentence, like she has hit a patch of silence and is trying to step across it. In that silence, your heart makes a new kind of noise. She resumes, you laugh it off. Later, your dog greets you at the door, with a growl he saves for mail carriers and men in hats. He circles you once, like you are furniture moved 2 inches to the left. When he finally wags, it looks like an apology he was forced to make. You decide to test reality the way you would test a rope over a ravine. You leave yourself a note on your nightstand in messy, undeniable handwriting. Remember the lemon. The lemon sits on the counter, cool and bright. In the morning, the note is on the fridge and the fruit is gone. In its place is a neat little half moon of rind, as if someone, perhaps you, perhaps not, made tea and cleaned up. You could swear you taste lemon in your mouth. People begin to bring you stories with your fingerprints, but not your hands. You lent money. You made a promise. You were at a party, dancing in a way you never dance. They have photos where your smile looks genuine and your eyes look like a stranger is wearing them. You do not argue. You say you do not remember. They confuse that with refusal. Their faces harden in little ways that chip your day into pieces. It spreads. A calendar alert arrives for an appointment you never booked at a clinic you do not know. And yet, the name on the file matches yours. The birthday matches. The insurance matches. The voice on the phone is warm. They thank you for confirming yesterday. You hang up on politeness instead of terror. You swallow air that tastes like the inside of a new car. You do not own a new car. Your keys are heavy with the same old scratches. When trust collapses, protocols spring up. You begin to narrate your life out loud, so a witness exists, even if that witness is only the walls. You set traps for yourself. You record a message in the low light of evening, your voice soft, saying your full name, the date you believe it is, and one truth no one else could know. In the morning, you press play and hear your voice apologize before the words you remember arrive. You listen again. The apology is there, shaved thin, a breath shaped like a sorry hiding between syllables. You walk outside. Someone waves like they know you from a life you didn't live. You wave back because it is easier. The sky looks correct and the wind moves like it always has. It is the people who glitch. Or maybe it is you. A neighbor addresses you by the name on your coffee cup from that first morning, and your mouth nearly answers to it because your mouth wants peace. You stand very still and wait for the delay to catch up. It doesn't. Here is the last thing you can trust, you tell yourself. Your own doubt. Even that feels like glass in your hands. You look at your reflection in the storefront window and ask it a question without words. It smiles kindly, late by a breath. And for the first time you notice, there is no fog on the glass where your breath should be. Where it should be, there is only a clear patch of world looking back, unblinking, ready to keep going without you. The crowd moved like a tide, and the man at the front had never learned to swim. That is how it began. A handful of people on a stalled platform, the air stuck between stale and metallic, the muffled alarm whining somewhere above us. Red lights pulsed on the tiled walls. Phones rose for answers and found none. Then he climbed onto a bench and lifted his arm like a shoreline. He wore the kind of reflective vest anyone can buy, the kind that reads as authority even when the letters are just a trick of light. His badge hung from a plain lanyard. I recall it swinging, blank as a mirror, but none of us were looking that closely because he sounded like certainty. "This way, folks," he said, quick and quiet. The crowd steadied on his words the way you steady a shaking table with a folded napkin. He did not shout. He did not need to. He spoke in an even rhythm that cut through the alarm. "This way, folks, quick and quiet." He repeated it 3 times, like a password. Someone beside me asked, quiet to herself, if the vest was the right color for this line. Someone else shushed her, as if doubt might spook the plan. He led us to a service door with paint chips curling at the edges. A staff-only sign blinked in our peripheral vision and then vanished beneath the relief of motion. He badged the sensor with a swipe that made no sound, but the door clicked anyway, because someone on the other side had already cracked it. A flood of bodies followed. The narrow corridor swallowed our steps and spit back echoes. The lights buzzed with that insect hum that makes your teeth itch. I kept staring at the badge. It danced again when he turned. A blank rectangle. Maybe it was the angle, I told myself. Maybe the glare. He never looked fully back. He kept his shoulders squared toward the next door, the next turn, the next set of instructions. "This way, folks. Quick and quiet." The words repeated with the exact same cadence, like a song on a loop. No new information, just the comfort of gravity. A woman in a green jacket tried to ask where we were going. He raised his hand without turning, and the hand itself was enough to hush her. The rest of us apologized to her with our eyes, because she was slowing the flow. That is the part that still bothers me. Our gratitude for being moved, even if we did not know where. The corridor bent and narrowed. Phone screens dimmed, then died. The ceiling lowered by an inch, then another. Someone grazed the back of my neck with a breath, and we all flinched. It wasn't fear of him yet. It was fear of standing still with strangers that made us love him. When a real worker finally appeared, he wore a different vest, a darker one, a utility belt heavy with useful metal. He looked startled to see us, then angry. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, and it made us laugh in a brittle, guilty way, because the question sounded ridiculous. Where we were told. Who told you? He glanced past us, waited for an answer that would have a face. He was gone. The benchman, the shoreline. He had slipped through a side door without a sound, or maybe he had never been at the front at all. Security led us back to the platform through a wider door we had not noticed. We spilled out, flushed and embarrassed, while the alarm finally calmed into a distant blink. Later, a guard with a jaw like a locked drawer watched the footage. He ran it back and forth, then looked at me the way a parent looks at a child and says, "There is no monster under the bed." The tape showed a group moving together, one person stepping up for a moment, then falling back, then another, then another. No single leader all the way through. People filling the silence with motion, like stuttering that looks like speech. I wanted to argue, because I remembered his hand, his voice, quick and quiet. The words still sat in my mouth like stale mints. I remembered the badge like a blank moon, catching the light and giving nothing back. I remembered how relief can make a lie feel like a blanket. Days later, I heard the same phrase in a grocery store when the fire alarm chirped for a test. A man behind me said it in that exact rhythm. "This way, folks, quick and quiet." He meant well, I think. He pointed us toward an exit sign that was not illuminated. People followed anyway. One person asked if we should wait for staff. Another shushed her. I did not follow this time. I stood still and watched the current take them, a river conjured by the idea of a riverbed. There is a glitch in us that paints a crown on certainty. It is small and human and dangerous. A vest that looks official. A voice that returns to the same safe phrase. A crowd that wants to stop being a crowd and become a line. The false leader is not a magician. He does not need to be. He only has to be the shape our fear can pour itself into. And once it does, it is very hard to remember how to stand still. There was only one key on the hook, but two sets of footsteps in the hallway. You feel it before you can explain it, the sense that something wearing your voice is already a step ahead, doing things you meant to decide later. That's the unnerving part, not the mirror. The mirror is simple. It's when the copy moves first. Maybe it starts small. A message goes out from your phone that you don't remember typing. Your friend says, "Thanks for checking on me last night." And you smile automatically while your stomach drops. Later, the call log is there, clear as daylight. The world shrugs because everything looks normal. It's just you, acting like you, except you didn't. This is the quiet terror of being your own double agent. Not an evil twin in a hallway, but a version of you that slips past the guardrail, agreeing to plans you're too tired to keep, saying yes to work you promised to decline, laughing politely when you meant to set a boundary. The duplicate never raises its voice. It doesn't need to. It leaves you to wake up with the aftermath, the extra commitment, the late-night anxiety, the text you wish you never sent. Psychologically, your mind is a master editor. It fills missing frames to keep the story of you running smooth, even if that means smoothing over the parts where your actions and intentions don't match. It feels coherent, so it feels true. And that is exactly why it's so disturbing when you notice the seams. Listen to the moments it happens. You tell yourself, "If they ask, I'll say no." And then you hear your own voice say, "Sure, I can take it on." You plan to leave early and watch your hands close the laptop only after everyone else. You mean to answer with, "I need some time," and instead you toss out, "No worries, I'm good." That is the copy stepping forward, rehearsed and efficient. Not a ghost in the system, but a script you've learned to run by default. And here's the twist that gives you a way back. The double agent isn't powerful. It's quick. It wins by acting first. If you slow the moment down by a breath, you change the scene. Say the words out loud in your head before your mouth moves. I'm tempted to say yes, but I need to check. I'm noticing I want to keep talking, but I'm done for tonight. Tiny phrases like that are wedges in the doorway. They keep the copy from slipping through. Try a simple test the next time you feel the tug. Ask, "Who benefits if I say yes right now?" If the answer is, "Not the version of me I promised to be," then you've spotted the hand on the lever. That question is a small light in the corridor. With light, shadows look like shadows again, not monsters. This isn't about control in every second, it's about authorship. You are allowed to pause before your lines. You are allowed to write a different ending to the same familiar scene. People won't always like it. The copy definitely won't. It's used to applause for being agreeable and fast, but the real you will recognize the silence that follows as relief, not emptiness. So when you notice the footsteps, don't sprint. Don't swing the door wide either. Stand still. Breathe. Make the choice you meant to make while you still remember why you meant it. If you do, the double agent has nowhere to stand. It can only move when you don't. And when you do, when you lock the door, you actually meant to lock. You'll hear only your own echo coming back. One set of footsteps, steady, leaving the hallway behind. Someone laughs in a room where no one told a joke. Not a chuckle, not a polite ha, but a full body shaking laugh that rattles the glass and then vanishes, like a hiccup in the atmosphere. That is how the night begins in the lab, where feelings are measured, weighed, and gently nudged to see what shakes loose. We call it the mood lab because that is what it does. It edits weather systems inside people. The room itself is a careful lie. Warm light, soft chairs, a distant citrus note in the vents. On the walls, a slow wash of color that nudges calm, and then curiosity, and then a thin edge of awe. Inside this quiet storm, the human operating system shows its secret seams. It is here that the strangest glitches arrive with their shoes tied together, like the mind forgot the order of things, like a page out of sequence. Subject 14 is told a story through headphones. It is a harmless story about a dog that hides its toy under a couch and then forgets where it put it. Every time the word couch plays, his face resets. The skin around his eyes smooths, the corners of his mouth fall back to neutral, and his next sentence loops to the start. He never notices. He thinks he is improvising, but the sentence is the same, the rhythm is the same breath taken in at the same place. We try to swap the word, sofa, love seat, even bench. Only couch does it, as if some deep index inside his head points to a missing file, and when the pointer hits the gap, he reboots without warning. Across the hall, a woman watches faces on a screen, smiles, frowns, the small micro tremors of disgust and delight. We ask her to mirror them. She does too well. Her expressions start arriving before the faces do, like an echo that races ahead of sound. A scowl appears on her. Then the scowl appears on the screen a breath later. She grows frightened, tears welling before she knows why she's about to cry. When we pause the video, her body keeps going, laughter like a bird flapping on a silent branch, grief flooding in from nowhere. She pulls her sleeves down, whispers that she feels possessed by other people's weather. In the observation corridor, a guard stares into the convex mirror and waves to himself. On the third wave, he does not wave back. He tilts his head left. The reflection tilts right. He smiles. The man in the mirror hesitates, then copies. The guard steps closer, presses his palm to the glass, and whispers his own name. The name sounds foreign, slick with newness. He laughs, a small wrong laugh, and backs away as if leaving a room he just entered. We map these moments like storm trackers. A scent of pine makes one subject forget nouns and begin to describe everything as color. The red pen, the red cup, the red thought. Another man can no longer tell when a joke is done, so he keeps laughing in slow, diminishing circles as embarrassment drips through him like cold syrup. One woman's memories reorder by mood rather than time. She swears her happiest day happened yesterday, even though it was years ago, and she can feel the warmth of it on her skin like sunlight through a window she cannot locate. These are not parlor tricks. They are cracks where light leaks in and shows us the gears. In the center of the lab, a metronome ticks. We set it at a pace just slower than a heartbeat. People in the room blink to it without meaning to. Their breathing aligns, then their speech. A small delay slips in, a lag between thought and mouth, and suddenly everyone sounds dubbed. The lab becomes a foreign film with familiar faces. Someone reaches to adjust the tempo and misses the knob by a hair, fingers closing around air that felt solid a second ago. Hands, it turns out, are terrible at time travel. There is a kindness in the glitches if you look long enough. They remind us that a person is a chorus of processes trying to sing in key. When one voice goes sharp or flat, the others scramble to harmonize, and sometimes they cannot. They fall out of step. They loop. They get ahead of the song. The lab does not fix anyone. It listens. It records the strange music of humans when the rhythm slips. When a word like couch becomes a trap door, when a mirror becomes an almost stranger. And as the lights dim and the citrus fades, the room exhales. Somewhere, another laugh starts up from nowhere, and for a breath or two, all the weather inside us changes at once. Midnight has a way of turning ordinary choices into traps. A friend once sent me a message that said, "Keep this between us," followed by a secret that wasn't theirs to share. The room was still, the street outside was empty, and I could feel the test in the request before I knew it was a test. If I agreed, I'd be loyal to them and disloyal to someone else. If I refused, I'd be disloyal to them and loyal to my principles. There was no clean door out. That is how a loyalty test works. It pulls you into a hallway with mirrors, then asks which reflection is the real you. Here's the glitch. The moment loyalty is put under a spotlight, the mind starts performing. You monitor your words. You calculate reaction times. You watch for how quickly they watch you back. None of it is natural. A loyalty test makes love feel like surveillance and friendship feel like theater. And when the curtain goes up, we forget our lines. A small story. 2 coworkers split a project. One of them, Nate, quietly leaves a tiny mistake buried on page 3, then waits to see if Mia catches it and fixes it without saying anything. His logic: if she notices and helps, she is loyal. If she notices and tells their manager, she is not. What unfolds is stranger. Mia sees the mistake, flags it in the document with a calm note, and messages Nate, "Spotted a small issue. Want me to adjust, or do you prefer to?" She expects teamwork. Nate reads her note as a failure. He wanted secret rescue, not straightforward trust. He feels exposed, embarrassed, and a little angry. The test wasn't measuring loyalty. It was measuring whether Mia could guess a rule Nate never said aloud. Psychologically, that is the trap door. Tests like these flip the brain into threat mode. When we sense evaluation, we protect ourselves, not each other. Openness contracts. Suspicion expands. People do not become more loyal under a microscope. They become careful, distant, and a little colder. The paradox is that connection grows when people feel heard and safe, not when they feel examined for proof. People are more cooperative when they feel heard, not surveilled. Another story. A partner forgets to reply. Instead of sending, "Are you okay?" the other partner waits on purpose, clocking the minutes, storing the silence like evidence. They invent an experiment. If the reply comes by a certain hour, loyalty passes. If not, loyalty fails. By the time the message finally pings, hurt has hardened into a verdict. The algorithm in their head has already returned a result. No conversation can compete with a score that was set in secret. There is a quieter way that feels almost too gentle to be powerful. Ask for what you need before you ask someone to prove it. Say, "I need to know that if I tell you something sensitive, you will be thoughtful with it." Or, "When I miss a message, please assume I am not ignoring you." Say it when the room is calm and the stakes are low. It sounds simple, but it is not small. Psychologically, saying your terms out loud creates safety. Safety makes people generous. And generosity, repeated over time, grows into the solid, steady kind of loyalty that does not need to be tested. If you want to test anyway, try this one. Notice what people choose when no trap is set. Do they tell the truth even when it is inconvenient? Do they hold their own boundaries while respecting yours? Do they share credit and carry blame honestly? These are not tricks, they are patterns. And patterns never need a hidden camera. There is something unsettling about how easily we turn into machines when we are afraid. We build tiny experiments in our heads and then let them decide whether someone gets to stay close. But loyalty is not a riddle to solve. It is a rhythm to keep. Instead of demanding proof, invite clarity. Instead of catching someone in a slip, catch them in an effort. Choosing connection over routine makes trust feel less like a verdict and more like a living thing you both keep alive. The most disturbing glitch is not betrayal. It is the moment you start watching the people you love like a security feed. Stepping away from the monitor is not naive. It is brave. Ask plainly, listen fully. Let their consistent actions over time be your answer. And if you ever feel the itch to set a trap, remember the hallway of mirrors. Step out of it. Walk with them in the open where loyalty can breathe. The lever was cold in my hand when I realized it was choosing me back. I had built the rig to catch the tiny tremors that ripple through a brain just before a decision. A little hum, two lights, a choice between left and right. That was all. I told the volunteers it was simple. Push the lever when you feel it. No hurry, no pressure. Just a moment, and then a choice. The machine began to whisper before they moved. Left, it would murmur in green. Right, it glowed in amber. A heartbeat later, their fingers confirmed the prediction. Every time. They laughed. I laughed. It was a neat party trick until it was not. One night, I sat alone with the rig, cables coiled like sleeping snakes, my own head wired to the mesh. I breathed slow. I told myself I would not move until I had decided. The green light flicked on anyway. I felt a pinch in my wrist, then my hand slid obediently. It was like watching a stranger use my skin. I tried the other way, waiting longer, then longer still, until my tongue went dry. Amber reached me before I could reach it. I stared at my palm and felt a faint tick, as if something in me had already thrown the switch and was just letting me in on the joke. After that, small, wrong things began to happen in the seams of my day. I would pour coffee and set the mug down, then realize an identical mug was already cooling by the sink, its ring of steam shivering in the same patch of sun. A coworker would start to speak, stop, and then deliver the same sentence syllable for syllable, but with a half smile that hadn't been there the first time. A woman in a red coat walked past my window, and then, unblinking, walked past again, and then again. She should have turned the corner. She did not. In the lab, the machine grew bold. It started announcing choices I had not offered. Stand, blink, scratch your left ear. Don't think of your father. Each instruction arrived just before my body performed it, and the delay between the whisper and the act stretched into an aching electric thread. It was not predicting me. It was conducting me, a baton tapping time against bone. I shut it down. I unplugged the wall. I pulled cables until the rig lay in a snarl of limp veins. The hum faded, and with it the stutters in the world. The woman in red finally turned the corner. The elevator doors, which had been shivering open and closed, settled. I slept for the first time in days. In the morning, I woke to a click inside my jaw. Not loud, not painful. Just a neat mechanical tap, like a chess clock touched by a careful hand. I made coffee. My hand reached for the sugar before I could remember whether I take it. I do not. I checked my phone. My thumb hovered, then unlocked the screen on its own. The machine was dead. The machine was still working. I stood in the doorway and tested it. Left foot, right foot, blink, smile, frown. Each began in me without my permission. No voice, no lights, just that soft tap, and a feeling like a coin slipping between my fingers into a slot. Somewhere, something took my hesitations and turned them into orders, then routed them back through the familiar hallway of my muscles so I could pretend they were mine. You know that sensation when your name falls out of your mouth in a room where no one asked for it? When you put a spoon in the freezer and your keys in the sink? When your hand hovers over a door and you decide, clearly, to walk away, and yet you hear the latch click behind you? Those are the little ruptures where the wiring shows. I went back to the lab and found the lever exactly where I had left it, still cold, still innocent. I wrapped my fingers around it as if holding it could anchor me to myself. The choice that rose was not left or right. It was smaller and sharper. Speak, stay silent. The click came. I closed my mouth and heard my voice anyway. So, here's what I learned. We are not built to bear the sight of our own clockwork. We are walking around with a tiny croupier in our skulls, raking chips and calling bets. And most days we are lucky enough to ignore the sound of the rake. But If you listen too closely, if you wire your head to a question and ask it what comes first, you may find that your choices do not bloom out of you, they pass through you. And once you feel that passage, the disturbing part is not the sense that you have lost control. It is the realization that control was a costume, and the zipper runs down your spine. The clock on the wall blinked, but the hands never moved. They were painted in that thick black that promised certainty. Still, they hovered between moments, like a breath held too long. Chairs hummed with the faint vibration of the building, all vinyl and size. A pale sign above the reception desk read, "Now serving," and the number beneath it might have been 72, or it might have been the shape you get when a 7 and a 2 grow tired of being themselves. I held my card like a ticket to the rest of my life. It felt warm from my palm, soft around the edges from the kind of waiting that rubs things smooth. A woman across from me kept rereading the same page, her lips moving soundlessly. Every so often, a tear slipped down her cheek at the same sentence, as if the sadness were printed in the ink. A man in a blue jacket rose, took 2 steps, and sat again. When he rose the second time, it was not a decision. It was muscle memory replaying a tune. The receptionist smiled in a way that did not include her eyes. "We'll be with you shortly," she said. The word shortly stretched, thin and glittering, and snapped into the silence like a rubber band. She blinked once, twice, precisely the same each time. The plant beside her had a leaf that wasn't sure if it wanted to fall. In the corner, a child's toy car rolled a few inches and stopped. It did that again. And again. I stood to test the door, to feel the cold metal of the handle, to pull and slip into a hallway where minutes might walk forward. The door opened on another waiting room that was exactly this waiting room. Same chairs, same clock, same number, frozen like a held note. A man in a blue jacket looked up, surprised to see me coming in. I looked down at my hands and found my card there, warm and soft around the edges. I had the sudden sense that somewhere behind me, a door was opening to let me in. After that, I made a map, not on paper, in my chest. Between the breath in and the breath out, the vent above us sighed 5 times before the receptionist said shortly again. The woman's tear fell after a rustle, a beep, and the hollow clack of a heel. The child's toy car rolled, and 7 heartbeats later, rolled again. I placed these beats like stones in a stream. I hoped to cross. Breaking the stream felt dangerous. I knocked my knee against a chair to change the pattern. The sound rang, small and sharp. The receptionist looked up, blinking her careful blink. "We'll be with you shortly," she said. The man in the blue jacket rose, took 2 steps, sat down. The toy car rolled. Somewhere inside the wall, a machine exhaled. The clock blinked. The hands did not move. I tried louder things. I asked the woman what her book was about. She lifted her eyes with effort, as if they were heavy, and said, "I am still waiting to find out." The words did not match the shape of her mouth. A fraction too late, a fraction too early. She turned the same page back, as if on cue. The man in the blue jacket said, "My father is coming," and his voice was a recording starting in the middle. From the desk, the pen in its little chain tapped the counter in a rhythm I knew I had heard before. Tap, 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 pause, tap. When I counted, the numbers came out wrong. I said 1, and it felt like 2. I said 2, and it thinned into nothing. The waiting was not just time. It was a place that did not understand counting. Or perhaps it was a place where counting understood me too well and hid its face. At some point that I cannot place, the sign above the desk flickered. The number shifted through shapes not meant for human eyes. Then it settled. The receptionist reached for the microphone. The air closed in. My name slid into the room, clear and perfect, the way my mother would say it when I was in trouble. It felt delicious, like a door unlocking. I stood dizzy with relief, with fear, with the sense that there was a hallway now that did not loop back into itself. Every head turned in one motion. Not the eyes first, not the chin, but the whole face as if it were hinged. "Please sit down," they said together, not in chorus but in layers, a thick sound made of many thin ones. The receptionist smiled with her unchanged eyes. "We'll be with you shortly," she said, and the seed of the word lodged in my throat. I sat. The number on the sign became the number it had always been. The plant hesitated, leaf undecided. The toy car rolled. Somewhere behind me, a door opened. A man in a blue jacket entered, surprised to see me, holding his card that was warm and soft around the edges. The clock blinked. The hands did not move. If you ever find a room like that, do not count. Do not look for proof. Sit if you must, but watch the moment your name arrives. It will be your name and not your name. A key that fits and still refuses the lock. The worst part is not the waiting. The worst part is understanding that the room is waiting for you to become the kind of person who will never stand. Streetlights blink like eyelids and the city exhales. And for a few breaths, everything is ordinary. Then your reflection blinks first. It happens in small ways at the start. You reach for your kettle, and the handle is on the other side. Your favorite mug has a chip that was never there. You tell yourself it is fatigue, the kind that makes time feel slippery. But then the cupboard has bowls you never bought, and a photo on the fridge shows you standing in a sweater you have never owned, smiling beside someone who is unmistakably your friend and not your friend at all. They call this the reality swap. When your life keeps its outline, but some hand rewrites the inside. Think of a play where the set stays the same and the cast changes mid-scene. One man leaves work at dusk, pockets heavy with keys that have always lived on the same silver ring. He crosses the parking lot, breath fogging, and presses the unlock button. The car that lights up is not his. Same model, same dent in the rear. Different air freshener swinging from the mirror. His key fits perfectly, but the glove compartment holds insurance papers with his name spelled a different way. He looks up, and the office across the lot has a different logo on the glass, as if the building got promoted without telling him. He goes home to a house that accepts his key but rejects his memories. The hallway is painted a shade he hates. Apparently he chose it. A woman on a morning run turns down a street she has sprinted 1,000 times. At the corner where the bakery should be, there is a florist that smells like rainwater and eucalyptus. She slows and stares at the spot where Cinnamon used to live, where the familiar baker in the red scarf would wave. Today there is a florist with a zigzag smile who calls her by name and asks if she wants her usual. The woman asks what that is. The florist lists flowers she cannot pronounce and mentions the vase shaped like a seashell. She laughs and says they must be mixing her up with someone else. The florist says they could not mistake that running form. When she gets home, a vase exactly like a seashell waits on her table, already filled. A teacher takes attendance and hears her name called from the back row in a voice that matches her own. The room tilts, in that way rooms are not supposed to. Her students look between the two of her, then pass them both at the clock, which is ticking in a rhythm she knows is wrong. One of her blinks and is alone again in front of a class that insists nothing unusual has happened. The bell rings too early, and they leave through a door that opens into a hallway she does not recognize. The lockers are on the opposite wall, as if the school mirrored itself in the night and hoped nobody would notice. These swaps are polite at first. They let you keep your name. They let your pet still pounce and your toothpaste still taste like mint. They only trade the small pieces, little arrangements you think you can ignore. But the human brain keeps score. It notices when your neighbor's laugh is half a note lower. It notices when the old scar on your knuckle shifts a fraction left. It notices when your mother's recipe card is written in a hand that is not hers, even though the loops and tails try to convince you. The cruel part is how convincing it all becomes. You find your own signature on documents you cannot remember signing. Friends share stories of nights you feel you missed, and their eyes soften the way eyes do when someone forgets. You test reality like a fence. You push on the planks. Sometimes you find a loose one. You write your name on the bathroom mirror with your finger and wait for it to fog and reveal the letters. Some mornings, it spells you differently. People who have lived through a swap talk about a sound, not a noise you can record, but a pressure, as if the day inhales before agreeing to continue. They talk about how doors feel heavier for a week. They talk about a taste in the mouth, like copper and rain. They say the trick is to keep moving, to accept the new rules of the scene, and trust your lines to catch up. They say if you hold too tightly to what a chair used to be, you will miss what it is trying to be now. Tonight, when you flip a switch and the light blooms a shade warmer than you own, pause. Name the changes, but do not chase them. If the street corner bakery became the florist, bring home something green and forgiving. If your keys belong to a car with a different smell, crack the window and let the road teach you its revised map. And if your reflection blinks before you do, stay with it. Let it be first this time. You might find the person on the other side has been waiting patiently, learning your lines, ready to hand them back. The strangest glitch is the one that wears your name. Not a flicker on a screen or a lag in a game, but the echo that pulls you back into the same version of yourself, again and again, like a hallway of mirrors that only reflects yesterday. You wake, you reach for the old script, and the day obliges. It feels natural, inevitable, almost comforting, and then it feels eerie. There's a loop that lives inside identity. The words I am and I am not become rails, and your choices run along them. You tell yourself, I am the reliable one, so you swallow your frustration to keep the peace, until resentment builds and you ghost a commitment, proving the opposite. Or you repeat, I am the screw-up, so you apologize before anything happens, and then trip over the apology, which somehow makes the mistake real. Psychologically, what you believe about who you are primes what you notice, how you act, and what you remember. Small actions turn into evidence, and the evidence hardens into belief. Let me show you a tiny moment you might recognize. A friend texts, "Hey, can you talk later?" You glance at the name, and a story boots up. I am always the helper. So you type back, "Of course, call any time," even though your evening is already stacked. Later, the phone buzzes during dinner. You send it to voicemail and tell yourself, I knew I would let them down. The loop closes. The next day you say out loud, I am just bad at boundaries. That line sounds true because you have proof. Proof you created. Another one. Your coworker says, we need you on the presentation. You're the ideas person. You smile, you jump in, you stay late, and you skip the part where you ask for support on the data. On the day, your slides sing and your numbers wobble. At lunch you joke, classic me, big picture, messy details. Everyone nods, the loop tightens. This is the part that gets subtle and scary. The loop doesn't only replay behavior, it edits memory. You forget the times you held a boundary cleanly or triple-checked a figure because those scenes don't fit the label. Identity is a strong narrator. It cuts scenes that contradict the plot. So how do you unglitch a system that lives inside your name? You do not need a grand rebrand. You do not need to declare, I am a new person, starting now. That is just another loop, shiny and fragile. Start smaller. Rename one behavior without labeling the whole self. Instead of, I am a people pleaser, try, I'm practicing asking for what I need. Notice the present tense and the softness. It makes room to try again tomorrow. Then cast a vote. 1. Micro-evidence. If your old loop says, I am always late, the vote is not a color-coded calendar and a new personality. The vote is leaving 5 minutes early once. If your loop says, I avoid conflict, the vote is one honest sentence that begins with I. If your loop says, I am bad with money, the vote is opening the app and looking without flinching for 1 minute. That is all. The moment after the vote is when the glitch tries to rewrite it. Expect the voice that says, that was nothing. Answer with, it was a different choice. This is how a loop loosens. It also helps to borrow a better story from someone who sees you clearly. Ask a friend, "What do you notice I do well when I'm at my best?" Listen for verbs. You are not a title, you are a sequence of acts, and acts can change. If you want a simple image to carry, think of a turnstile. Every time you pass through it with a small action that matches who you want to be, the counter clicks. It does not care about speeches, it counts passes. Over time, the total becomes undeniable, and your narrator updates the plot because the evidence is different. That is how belief catches up to behavior, and behavior keeps belief honest. It is the cleanest kind of feedback loop, grounded in how our minds link identity to habit and action. The scary part was never that you were broken. It was that the loop was invisible. The relief comes when you can see it. Call it what it is. Cast one vote. Let the counter click. And when you catch your old name tugging at your sleeve, whisper the truer one you are building. The glitch loses power when the story changes. That is the beauty of an identity loop. It is not a prison. It is a path you can turn. The street catches on the edge of a blink and reality stutters. A neon sign hums, the light flickers, and for half a breath, the world doesn't line up. The hallway stretches a little too long. A stranger's smile tilts into something unfamiliar. The clock on the wall hesitates, then leaps ahead, as if it skipped a frame. That is a perception crash. It is not just weird, it is disturbing, because it feels like the floor gives way and the rules we trust go missing. Here is what's happening under the skin. The brain runs on predictions. It guesses what comes next, then patches in the details. Most of the time, the stitching is invisible, but when attention slips or reality throws a curve, the seam shows. And when the seam shows, we feel haunted by our own mind. Picture this in a grocery aisle. You scan a label and swear it says alive, not olive. You look again, and it is perfectly normal. No sign of the mistake, except the quick cool down in your chest, or crossing a street at dusk. A car appears closer than it should be. Your heart jolts, your feet stop, your breath forgets what to do. Then everything snaps back into place, and you wonder if anyone else felt it. Some moments linger longer. A mannequin looks like it turned its head. The shadow under the table moves. The voice in a crowd seems to say your name. Each one leaves a residue, a cold fingerprint on a warm day. Here is the trap. In the gap between what you expect and what you see, the brain improvises. It throws a story at the glitch, tired, stressed, dehydrated, cursed, simulated. The story is not the villain, it is a bandage. But if the bandage sticks too tight, you carry the fear home. There is a gentler response. Name the crash when it happens. Out loud if you can. Something like, that was a perceptual slip. The moment you call it what it is, the fog thins. Psychologically, this works because the brain feels safer when there is a label and a frame. Naming the event turns chaotic noise into a pattern it can handle again. Then, do the simplest body reset. Unclench the jaw, drop the shoulders. Let 2 slow exhales be heavier than usual. The body is the anchor that keeps the mind from spinning into the deep end. If you can, look for what changed. New light, sudden sound, a moving reflection at the edge of your vision. Even a small cause gives the nervous system a handhold. No cause? That's fine. The mind can stand on a feeling. Tell yourself, this is the snap of a system catching up. Precision, not panic. And when the urge to explain spirals into strange territory, pull back to something truer and smaller. A machine made of meat tried to keep up with the world and missed by a moment. There is meaning here, beyond comfort. A perception crash reveals how much of life is inference. We do not receive the world pure, we make it together with it. That sounds unsettling until it becomes empowering. If the mind can invent fear in a blank space, it can also invent steadiness. It can write a new line over the static. The way through is not to fight the glitch, but to fold it into the story. We enter with a jolt. We reframe what it is. We live a small scene that shows it, and we leave with a thought that lingers and lights the way out. So the next time the room tilts, meet it softly. Let the breath be the first repair. Let a few honest words be the second. Let the body and the label teach the brain there is nothing to run from. The world will reassemble. The stitching will fade, and you will have learned something rare, that even when the picture shakes, you can stay with it. You can hold your ground, and you can bring yourself back. The echo of a perception crash is not terror. It is awareness. It is the reminder that we are not just watching reality. We are helping build it, frame by frame. And when the frame skips, we do not fall. We notice. We name. We return. That is how the unsettling becomes survivable. That is how the glitch becomes a teacher. That is how the perception crash ends. By the time the wind found the tired Main Street, the people were already a beat behind it. A gust nudged the flags, and the flags went. Then the arms along the sidewalk followed in perfect delay, sleeves lifting as if strings had just tugged them. A lady at the hardware store smiled. Then a breath later, her face caught up to the smile, like it had been mailed ahead and only just arrived. I did not mean to stop there. My map was wrong, or my will was weak, and the road bent me toward a town with hand-painted signs and a clock that thought it was morning. The wooden arch said, "Welcome," but someone had scrubbed the word hard and left pale streaks where the letters used to be. People called it Puppet Town. I did not yet know why. I parked and the parking lot learned about it a moment after I did. Keys out, doors shut. Then the echo, but not sound. The imitation of it. Doors up and down the street clicking an instant later. A soft, hollow chorus that never belonged to me. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself a lot of things, and each one landed half a step behind the last. Inside the diner, chrome shone like old teeth. The waitress set down a glass of water on the counter, and only after it touched did her hand move away. The ice looked like it wanted to be steam. She blinked, then blinked again, another blink that trailed the first like a shadow in slow pursuit. "Morning or afternoon?" I asked. Her lips shaped the words morning or afternoon, and a heartbeat later, the sound arrived with the same phrase, like a recording chasing the original. "Afternoon," I said. "Afternoon," I said, came back to me in her voice, then in my own, lilting from the back booth where no one sat. Someone in the kitchen laughed, a bright clip sound, and then that laugh looped once, twice, before the real chuckle made it out into the room. The wall clock reached up with both hands and tugged the minute forward twice in a row. Outside, the street moved like a lesson. People turned their heads at the exact same angle as the man in the hat, then corrected to a better angle, as if they agreed it looked more natural. A girl beside the mailbox skipped in a pattern that repeated wrong on purpose. 1, 3, 2, 3, 1. A second girl across from her caught the rhythm late, then stuck with it, smiling too wide and too steady. Their mother lifted a hand to wave, and for a blink, her fingers were locked in a stiff fan before something inside remembered how to bend. Puppet Town was obedient. It waited for cues that came from places I could not see. I tried to stand in the shade, and the shade tried to stand with me. There was a man selling peaches. He looked at his display, then looked at it again. The second look slick with déjà vu. The peach in his hand a heartbeat behind his hand. "Pick one," he said. "Pick one," the sign on the table said, as if it had heard him and was eager to help. I took a peach. He took a peach after me, held it up at the same angle I had, then frowned in the same way I did not know I had frowned. "You get used to it," someone murmured near my ear, except no one stood near me. I heard the words before I felt the breath of them. They pressed into my skin a moment late, like a warm hand on a door you have already walked through. "This town," the not voice said, "is a mirror with a lazy hinge." I wanted to leave. The road out looked like any road, with patient cattails and a ditch where clouds gathered in puddles. I turned the wheel, felt the tires answer, and then I heard the exact soft grind of my tires again from the field, like a second car making the same decision, invisible and very close. The same truck passed me twice in opposite directions, the driver's hand up, then down, then up again. Different choices performed in sequence. I kept driving until the diner returned, as if it had been cut out and taped ahead on a loop of sky. When I went back inside, everyone was already inside. The waitress's smile arrived on time. The glass was already sweating with the water I had not yet asked for. "Afternoon," she said, and behind her a boy in a corner seat repeated it again into his hands, practicing my voice. There is a point where you stop thinking you can fix the track and start wondering if you are part of it. I moved my hand to scratch my wrist and watched the whole room rehearse it a moment later. I swallowed. The air swallowed. I did not like how my throat sounded in a crowd of throats. Listen, if you ever find that road and the welcome is turned light with eraser burns, do not wave first. Do not shout hello and wait for the echo. Keep your hands at your sides and your eyes on your own time. Walk without rhythm, the kind of clumsy walk you would be ashamed to teach a child. Do not let them take your manner and hand it back to you on a delay. In a place where everything copies, the only defense is to be a mistake they do not know how to repeat. I took my peach. I kept my mouth closed. I left like I had somewhere urgent to be, and I did not look back because I had already seen what my looking would look like. Somewhere behind me, the town finished our conversation without me. Somewhere ahead, the wind blew, and only the trees moved.